not talking about transition, just going from A to B?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. A to B is the solution. Let fossil fuels do what fossil fuels do. Just burn their coal, burn their oil, burn the gas. At least they're pumping up carbon and methane into the atmosphere, honestly. Well, not that honest, because they don't measure methane, which is 90 times worse than carbon. But at least the carbon is being done honestly. Encourage the green hydrogen sector to come in really fast. Okay, it's there. There's renewable power all over the world. We now know how to make electrolyzers much cheaper, like 25% of the original cost. We know how to do that now. We don't have an excuse to get into it.
Does it need to be cheaper than oil and fossil fuel for it to be viable worldwide?
Well, right now it is. Okay, so let's just swallow that bit of financial data. Right now it is cheaper, and it's getting more cheap. It's the only fuel you know of which is declining in value.
You don't have enough of it, right, to power the world?
Yes. That's only because we haven't had policies to support it. If we had policies to support it 5-10 years ago, it would be everywhere. You'd see the global warming budget start to come down.
Yeah.
Now, we've got 5 or 10 years to make a huge difference. I need policy leaders all over the world to appreciate now, okay, big business is transacting with green hydrogen in multi-billion-dollar agreements. We now know it's here and it's here to stay. Let's spread it everywhere.
Coming up on the program, the hydrogen revolution. We'll speak with the CEO of Italian utility firm Snam about his new book and why he thinks green hydrogen will be competitive in just 5 years. Plus, how are airlines working to become more sustainable? We'll look at how Airbus plans to step up in the climate fight. This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lines, and this is Bloomberg Green. What will the world look like in 2050? Will global temperatures have stabilized, electric vehicles be abundant, and solar and wind power homes around the world? According to Marco Alvera, the CEO of Italian energy company Snam, that vision of the future could be a reality. And he says that hydrogen will pave its way. As he tells it in his new book, The Hydrogen Revolution, Alvera's moment of reckoning came in November 2018 when he tasked the Snam Scenarios team with studying how Europe could reduce its CO2 emissions to zero by 2050. Looking through the results of the study, Alvera said he was struck by how much hydrogen was in Europe's energy mix by that year. Beyond the abundance of hydrogen, the SNAM model also predicted that it would be the cheapest form of decarbonized energy for many sectors, and that it could be cheaper than today's prices for oil, coal, and nuclear power. Our Maria Tadeo spoke with Alvera at COP26.
It's happening all very fast. We see the cost of hydrogen coming down a lot. Hydrogen will play a big role in the energy mix. I don't know if it's going to be 15 or 25% of a fully decarbonized energy system, but it's going to be big. Costs are coming down, and people are waking up to the fact that it's the only way to decarbonize certain sectors, the so-called hard-to-abate sectors.
And you say it's the only way and the costs are coming down. Where do you see prices moving? Because a lot of the reticence at times has to do with the pricing, that some argue, well, it's still not the cheapest option out of the market.
So when I was first working in hydrogen in 2004, it was costing $1,000 per megawatt hour. 2010, $600. Today, $100, and we see it going down to $50 in 5 years' time, and to going down to $25 per megawatt hour in the next 10 years or so, which is a quarter of where it is today. That's really because renewable energy, and we're talking green hydrogen here, renewable energy costs are falling, but the cost of making the electrolyzer, which is the kit that you use to convert solar or wind energy and water into hydrogen, the cost of this kit is falling a lot because it doesn't really exist on an industrial scale. So as we build up capacity, we industrialize it, we standardize it, and we squeeze costs out. That's really the cost trajectory.
And for that, of course, you need demand, however, for governments and also institutions to kind of buy into this idea that it is the future and we want to invest and create the infrastructure. What are they telling you? When you speak to governments, when you speak to officials, are they keen on this?
They're very keen. So the Department of Energy shares our view in the States of getting to below $1 a kilo, which is $25 a megawatt hour. The European Union has a hydrogen strategy, which is very clear, and several member states have the same. Chile wants to export a lot of hydrogen. China's big on hydrogen. Australia's very big on hydrogen. Japan is blending already hydrogen. So I would say the world is now really focused on this because it's the only way to store energy for a long period of time economically is to convert it into either a liquid or a gas.
And of course, you talk about the price, but the other big component is the volume. You know, how big can you go? Where do you see that on a time scale?
So wherever it's sunny or windy, you can produce very cheap hydrogen eventually. And so compared to oil and gas, which are concentrated in few parts of the world, it's going to be very democratic from that point of view. So every sunny place, every desert, every ocean wind can be turned into hydrogen that we can put on ships, in pipes, and really start trading it around the world. So it's going to happen a lot faster than a lot of people think.
So, and when you say a lot faster, what is that in time?
As I said, $50, which is essentially oil parity within 5 years. And then, depending on how quickly we ramp it up after that, we could get to $25, which is coal parity before the end of the decade.
And in big scale.
In big scale, because once you get to coal parity, that's the only way we're going to get China and India to stop burning new coal. We have businesses in China and in India, and I see a lot of hydrogen development, a lot of renewable development in both countries. The India announcement was incredibly strong on 2030. Some people were upset about the 2017 net zero deadline, but when it comes to 30, he announced a big, big commitment to get to 50% renewables.
Were you surprised by it?
I was surprised that they would make it so explicit, and even the net zero is a big thing for them. And so I think it will happen faster than 2070 because of the falling cost of renewable and hydrogen. India's burning 80 gigawatt of oil, of diesel, to keep the lights on. So there's an immediate opportunity there, and we're very interested in working in that country.
And with regards to China, perhaps the fact that we haven't really seen them active, I guess the diplomats are working on this, but we haven't really seen the leadership.
It's going to be technology, it's going to be industry. I think China has committed to a net zero, which is very important. At the G20, China was clearly behind the 1.5 degrees. So I think a lot has been achieved between the G20 and COP, and I think what's really important is to see in the coming years how quick it's in our hands to make part of this happen in 5 years, or it could otherwise happen in 15, 20 years. It's about building the project. The capital is there. We saw how many trillions of dollars are already committed. What's missing is really the projects, and that's where companies like us step in.
Marco Alvera, CEO of SNAM there, speaking with our Maria Tadeo. Let's turn now to the aviation industry. It's a big contributor to global greenhouse gas emissions, and it's under pressure to change that. In October, the International Air Transport Association, a trade body representing airlines, approved a target of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. To achieve that, many airlines in the US and Europe are looking to buy sustainable aviation fuel made from renewable sources like used vegetable oil. Initiatives like these are pushing plane makers to come up with some radical new aircraft that will eventually cater to our growing appetite for travel without hurting the environment. We took a look at how Airbus, the world's #2 aircraft manufacturer, is stepping up to the challenge.
How long until we can fly emission-free? Airbus says it's more confident by the day it can be done by its 2035 target. Airbus's CEO spoke about its ambitions for hydrogen-powered planes at the company's summit in France.
The physics works. Hydrogen technologies are not new. They are used in other sectors. We use them in space on our rockets, and we don't need the laws of physics to change to be able to use hydrogen on our planes. So every day we become more confident, but we think we need to have a plane, we need to have the right fuels, the hydrogen available in the right quantity at the right place at the right time, and we need the regulations to be ready. So we really need the work and the collaboration of many people around the globe to make it happen on time.
But it could be a long wait until green passenger jets go mainstream. Larger aircraft with more than 150 seats are not expected to feature globally until about 2050. That means manufacturers and airlines today are under growing pressure to ramp up short-term innovations to cut their carbon. In the long term, meeting the ambitious plans for so-called green hydrogen means building a giant industry almost from scratch. To make that happen, British airline EasyJet is among those saying governments need to get involved and fast. Aviation's emissions over the last 3 decades leading up to the pandemic grew by about 80% to over 1 gigaton, and that's projected to double by 2050. According to Bloomberg NEF, about half of the airlines with the largest global market share have set net zero targets by that same date, nearly 3 decades away.
Coming up, from blue sky projects to the bottom line. We'll speak with our Bloomberg NEF expert Meredith Annex and dig into their models about how hydrogen fits into the future energy mix. This is Bloomberg Green. From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Kaylee Lines, and this is Bloomberg Green. Now let's bring in Meredith Annex, our Bloomberg NEF hydrogen specialist, to talk more about how hydrogen could change the energy landscape. So Meredith, what place do you think hydrogen is likely to have in the future energy mix globally?
Hydrogen's this incredible solution for us as we look to decarbonize because it's a perfect solution in areas that are hard to electrify. So where we like to think about hydrogen playing a role, it's in things like heavy industry, especially where you need a feedstock as well as energy source. and in things like dispatchable power, long-haul transport, maybe even shipping and aviation.
That sounds great that it can be used for such diverse industries. At the end of the day, though, how much is this going to cost?
Well, that's the amazing thing about hydrogen, because depending on how you make it, it can actually see significant cost declines in the future. So when we're talking about clean hydrogen, we usually mean green hydrogen produced from renewable electricity. And in that case, your hydrogen is almost as cheap as the renewables that are used to make it. So if you're in a place with really good renewable resources, you'll be able to have cheaper hydrogen. But even in places with less good resources, we think that hydrogen can be cheaper than $1 per kilogram, which is the price of unabated hydrogen today, and around $8 per million BTUs for those who prefer to think in energy units. And that can be achieved anywhere in the world by 2050, we believe.
All right, so let's talk about kind of the pros and cons list. I don't know where cost fits into that, but what are the advantages to hydrogen over other renewables, and then what are the drawbacks?
Yeah, main advantage is the fact that hydrogen can serve roles that electrons struggle with. And that's things like seasonal storage, for instance, or just anything where you need storability, where electrons are harder to store, hydrogen is going to be easier. That also leads to a downside, though, because hydrogen is less energy dense than the usual things that we use for storable energy today, like coal or oil or natural gas. So you will need more volume of storage to handle the same amount of energy.
Let's talk about the viability as well and how it may differ in different geographies. What is your view on that?
Yeah, so for green hydrogen, again, from renewable electricity, really places with the best renewable resources, things like Latin America or the Middle East, even Southern Europe, have really, really good potential for producing hydrogen. And then when you're looking at blue hydrogen, which is produced from natural gas or coal with carbon capture and storage, we do see that becoming more expensive than green hydrogen in the future, especially as renewable electricity costs come down. But that can be a viable option in places like the US Gulf Coast or Russia, where you've got good geological storage for the carbon, as well as ample natural gas that's quite cheap.
All right, great breakdown. Thank you so much to our Meredith Annex, our Bloomberg NEF hydrogen specialist. And of course, you can get more from the Bloomberg NEF team on the terminal and online. And they've recently done a podcast called Hydrogen 101 as part of its Switched On series. So from iron ore titans pivoting to cleaner energy to talk of a hydrogen revolution, that's it from this week's edition of Bloomberg Green. We'll be back next week with a deep dive into the state of electric vehicles. And you can keep the conversation going by following us on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter @Climate. I'm Kaylee Lines from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, and this is Bloomberg Green.
The great sci-fi art of the mid-20th century teased a vision of the future with one distinct element in common: a life for humans in outer space. Whether vacationing on an exotic new planet or commuting to the moon for business, space travel seemed like it was just around the corner. Yet here we are, a half-century later, and only about 500 human beings have ever left the bounds of Earth's atmosphere. But thanks to a set of ambitious private companies betting on the promise of space tourism, that long-awaited future could be here sooner than we think. For most of the history of spaceflight, governments have been the prime force behind nearly every aspect, from planning to funding to crew selection. But as early as the 1980s, proposals for commercial space tourism began to emerge, along with innovative solutions for getting people there, such as the wild concept of sticking a 74-person passenger cabin in the cargo bay of a NASA space shuttle. Although various non-astronauts have been selected for missions over the years, true space tourism didn't happen until 2001, when an entrepreneur named Dennis Tito coughed up an estimated $20 million to hitch a ride with the Russian Federal Space Agency for a week-long vacation aboard the International Space Station. 20 years later, we're seeing a new contender in this final frontier of tourism: private companies.
It's becoming a private enterprise situation, still very high risk with a high reward, potential reward. But, government is really out of the business of flying people now, and it's really going to be companies like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson that do that heavy lifting. Commercial space tourism is usually about taking the non-astronaut, the private citizen, into an orbital or suborbital flight. So you get a short amount of microgravity experience, and you can float and take some photos. And then you come back. This was something that technology had gotten to a point where the private sector was going to make a business out of this. There are multiple companies that want to get to the place where they fly people into space.
The first of these is Blue Origin, founded in 2000 by Jeff Bezos. Using the autonomous rocket system New Shepard, a tribute to the first American in space, Blue Origin plans to launch up to 6 passengers at a time, offering a rarefied treat of 62-mile-high views and a momentary experience of weightlessness. Booking officially kicked off in May 2021, with the very first seat to be auctioned off for charity. Meanwhile, Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic has also been pursuing a viable form of suborbital tourism, aiming for a launch in 2022 once Sir Richard himself has taken a flight.
I'm hoping to be able to go to space. I'd love to be able to coincide it with the moon landing and go to space. So I've got the whip on the team, and we'll see how we go.
The company claims to have lined up over 600 seat reservations so far, including Justin Bieber and Leonardo DiCaprio. Virgin has projected that the final cost of the ticket will be at least $250,000, or roughly $50,000 for each of the 5 minutes or so of weightlessness that you'll get to experience. Although costly, both companies' offerings aim to make suborbital flight a regular form of adventure travel, eventually driving down costs at scale to expand the customer base beyond the orbit of celebrities and billionaires. The third major contender is Elon Musk's SpaceX, which has set its sights even higher on orbital flights, which are
a whole nother level of complexity and energy and danger. When you go suborbital, if you're just going to go up above the von Karman line, which is 100 kilometers or about 62 miles, you only need to get up to maybe 5,000 miles an hour to get up there, and you go basically straight up and then straight back down. You don't have the reentry heating that you would see coming in from an orbital. So when you go orbital, I don't care if you're a baseball or a battleship, you've got to go 17,500 miles per hour, not just 5,000 miles an hour. The energies involved are much greater. By doing that, SpaceX has gone another level up, and that's what they're doing with the Inspiration 4.
Visit inspiration4.com for your chance to go to space.
Inspiration 4 is the first planned all-civilian mission into orbit, slated to launch in late 2021. The crew will bring their own set of diverse perspectives and backgrounds and experiences to test how a group of different people, namely people who aren't professional astronauts, could fare in space.
Until now, astronauts have had to be physically perfect, and this mission is changing that. And so I feel incredibly honored to be representing those who aren't physically perfect. At age 10, I was diagnosed with bone cancer, and I was treated at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And I spent a year there undergoing intense chemo and also surgery that ultimately saved my leg. I now work at St. Jude as a PA, a physician assistant, and I work with leukemia and lymphoma patients. The kids we work with are so brave, and they are very excited to watch me go to space because this is showing them that, you know, they're capable of doing this as well.
Haley, along with 3 other crew members, will spend 3 days in space, orbiting the Earth every 90 minutes before landing back off the coast of Florida.
Well, when you think about access, the first astronauts for the United States came from the test pilot side. And so women weren't allowed to be a part of that. We have somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s, somebody in their 40s, and somebody in their 50s. And so there can be access in all kinds of ways, whether you're talking about age, whether you're talking about gender, whether you're talking about race and ethnicity, and all of those things.
The first time, people are going up into space and not sent there by a superpower like the United States or Russia or China. Well, that's like really significant. And you've got to be very thoughtful about it. The whole game plan right now is to make space like really affordable and accessible for everybody, so that you can have fishing buddies going to space someday. But the first is special, and so with that, we wanted to have a crew selection process that could make space available to everyday people.
Getting to space is only the first step for space tourism. The next challenge is what to do and where to stay when you get there. Axiom Space is planning to launch the first segment of a new commercial space station in 2024. Their $2 billion project, called Ax Station, will become the first free-flying private international space station. Or, to use a more consumer-friendly term, a space hotel. Axiom isn't the only company out to make your space stay a little more comfortable. Bigelow Aerospace has been building what they call expandable habitat technology, like their B330, an inflatable pod module that expands once in orbit.
There's even one attached to the International Space Station right now they've been testing. And you take it up and it's rather small, and then you inflate it, and it seems to be working very, very well. This is likely to be the first kind of tourist hotel that you're going to see up in space. First of all, it's easier to carry instead of this giant tin can with all of that. The inflatables are lighter. You just blow them up, and they get a nice big size for about less than half the weight probably.
But even as space missions become accessible to civilians,
the risks of going into space are incredibly high, and you could die 1,000 ways that we can think of, and 1,000 other ways that we can't think of.
This is Michelle Hanlon. She's a space lawyer at the Mississippi School of Law, focused on protecting humans in outer space.
Now, I'm not an attorney for any of the space tourists, so I haven't been privy to their private contracts. But I can tell you that the FAA requires certain waivers to be in those contracts. So, for example, the FAA says, well, we're not going to make you make your spacecraft to a certain safety level. We are going to make you, spacecraft operator, make sure that you inform your space tourists of all of the hazards that you know of. I'd imagine a very long waiver, all the ways you can die in space. And you have to understand that there's health risks, and you have to indemnify the US government if you are launching from the United States. So those are things that we know a space tourist has to sign and has to waive. So now let's go back and think about our space flight participants. The FAA calls space tourists space flight participants. They don't call them astronauts. Why is that important? If you're not an astronaut, there's no obligation to rescue you if something goes wrong. It's a lot of money to set up a rescue launch. If it can even be done, it's something really important to think about, and that difference as we cross this threshold from having astronauts in space to having real people like me in space.
And when we are able to make it to space reliably enough, there's still a host of other legal and ethical issues to consider before space tourism can truly take off.
There are so many gaps in space law that we are going to have to put in a lot of sort of basement ideas. And so, for example, the Outer Space Treaty is a treaty that offers principles and guidelines for state activities, for the activities of national governments. It doesn't talk about private entities. It doesn't talk about humans in space. So now if something goes wrong, so let's think about all of the times hotels on Earth are sued, right? So slip and falls. You step on something in the bathroom, you sue the hotel, and it becomes a private lawsuit. Because of the vagaries of international law, If something happens in space, well, boy, you can sue the state that launched your spacecraft. You can sue the company that brought you there. You can sue the hotel. You can sue the individual. You can sue every government related to that, because the way the Outer Space Treaty and the Outer Space Regime have set this up is that anything that happens in space first has to go through a diplomatic channel before you think about suing in a court of law. And so every single slip and fall in a space hotel is a diplomatic nightmare. And so we really need to figure that out before we start sending a lot of people there. You think about human rights in space. Here, we don't think about a human right to oxygen because it's kind of all around us and free. It's not in a space hotel. So what happens if something happens and the oxygen depletes? Who gets the oxygen first? And then, of course, let's not even think about the labor. How do you treat your labor in a space hotel where that person may be there for 2 or 3 years without coming back to Earth? So a lot of things to think about.
Space habitats are more likely in the near future to focus on research missions and be a home for experiments that can't happen as easily back on Earth.
Space hotels, I think they garner a lot of headlines and a lot of news, but at the same time, that's not the first thing that you're going to see happen. They don't offer the compelling business case, I think, that you'll see from a place that wants to manufacture pharmaceuticals or a new type of crystal or some type of filament or fiber optic cables and other things that you can do in microgravity. The things that are actually, a high value finished good, when you get that back to Earth and you sell it for a very, very huge profit margin, that's what's likely to happen in space, as opposed to having a real estate platform that you sell to a tourist. A space hotel is really interesting, and it will probably happen, but it's not likely to be at the forefront of space commerce.
Even if space hotels are right around the corner, don't get too excited about booking a trip in one.
It's not a cheap ticket to ride to space, and it's going to be, millionaires and billionaires and that sort. But at the same time, the point was made that in the early days of airline trips, that was also a completely unaffordable ticket for most people. Those people who flew were people of means, and over time it becomes affordable to the masses. And I think that's the goal for all the entrepreneurs in space as well, to get those costs down to a point where it's not $10 million or $5 million or $300,000 ride into suborbital space. When it becomes more like buying a first-class ticket to go to Europe from the United States. So that's the goal, and the question is, can we get to that point?
Given the immense operating costs of getting to space, it may be years, if ever, until space tourism becomes a profitable venture for any of these companies. Virgin Galactic, the only publicly traded company of the three, has had a particularly rocky year, initially riding on the momentum of a SPAC deal, but more recently beset by launch delays and major funders, including Branson himself, selling large quantities of their stock in the company.
Space is really, really, really hard, and it's an absolute cliche, but it's one that happens to be very true. It's just really hard to do. That's also the reason that you've seen the delays that, Virgin had talked about flying years and years ago. And it became such a crazy point that Richard Branson actually stopped talking about it when he was asked, because it was never going to be when he predicted. But it's not insurmountable. And, investors have stepped up because this is something that is doable.
Despite the astronomical dangers and costs of getting to space, it may ultimately follow the course of other once fanciful modes of travel.
Wright brothers having, what was by modern standards a very unimpressive first flight, at Kitty Hawk. I mean, you had less than 20 years later, you had your first airborne ambulances being used to save lives. Fundamentally, the world is a more interesting place when people can go and dance among the stars and such.
The lure of space is innate. It's in our DNA. It's that exploration bug. We are an exploratory species, and we want to go out there and see what's out there.
That vision that I had in 1969 of seeing normal human beings travel into space, it's finally beginning to happen. When you get a bunch of people up there and they can all see it for themselves, that'll create even yet another revolution in how we treat our planet and the way we think about it.
So while 2001 came and went without quite looking like Stanley Kubrick's ultimate space fantasy, 2021 might finally be the year we're catching up.
If you visit California, you might be inclined to go to Disneyland, or jump in your convertible and take Highway 1 up the coast, or maybe make a pilgrimage to Yosemite. All very fine choices. But if you're the kind of person who revels in our planet's extremes, then it's Route 395 that you're after. This one glorious road will carry you from Death Valley's desert floor to sky-high views of Mount Whitney. You can see the 5,000-year-old bristlecone pines, the oldest living organisms. Or the bizarre tufa towers of Mono Lake. And true to California's boom and bust spirit, you can saunter around the ghost town of Bodie. What a novel experience to find an empty American city where all the businesses are shut down. To do 395 upright, it helps to have a guide, and mine is a man named Jan. And his crew, Aaron,
Let's tidy up first.
and Lemmy, the hardest partying dog of all time. Jan agreed to show me some of what 395 has to offer, but only if we agreed not to disclose any locations.
My name is Jan Srostra. I'm an industrial designer out of LA, and I spend a lot of time camping and a lot of time in the Eastern Sierra. It's a place I love, and sometimes I'm known as 395 North because my Instagram account, and I don't like to be known as that, but I'm trying to use it to set a good example and do more with it than just social media.
Where did we end up camping? We got here late last night. I wasn't even sure where we are.
This is BLM land, right on the outskirts of National Forest, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. Basically, everything outdoors wrapped into one.
Yeah. Good thing about California, man.
Oh, man. We have so much national forest and public land that you can literally just cruise out and find a place to camp. It's ours.
What I wish was mine is Jan's sweet truck.
It's a 2019 Ford Ranger. Has about 200 watts of solar in it and a fridge, and has everything that an RV has except for a toilet, but just on a smaller, simple scale.
And you drive us around day to day in LA.
Yep.
And then just roll out when you want.
It's my daily driver. Handles great. And then when I'm done with work, I can just bail and go camping. So the camper basically has only what I need. Think of it as backpacking with a car.
Yeah.
The fridge has a couple compartments. This is just a kitchen box, stove, utensils, and a bunch of stuff. This one has just dry food. Then when you get inside, there's a bed. The bed flips up, so you've got tons of room in here. This awning is phenomenal. If you want to pull that over.
That's cool.
Let me just pop that up.
Sorted.
So, home on wheels.
Yeah.
This is my vacation house.
Dude, it's so nice, man. Even with his nomad lifestyle, Jan faces the same big question as the rest of us. Do the internet and smartphones have to ruin everything? When you find the super special, beautiful spots, is that you busting out a map and like looking where it might be cool to go, or is it word of mouth and just getting to know people, the locals? And
if I see a dirt road, I just want to go down it. So a lot of it's just aimless rambling. It's a desire to just see something. Check that out. For some reason, it's more fulfilling than getting a recommendation from somebody. Or there's tons of apps and websites now, road trip apps, camping apps. They've proliferated. The knowledge is accessible on the internet, right? I used to fight the geotags, and I would get really pissed off. Like, why are you posting this place? It's gonna blow up, it's gonna get trashed. Now I've realized that you can't fight it. The internet has just shrunk the world. So we're not gonna stop it. We're not gonna stop people from going there. So I'm a lot more focused in conversation now with trying to set a good example. When you go, pick up your trash. When you're pooping out in the wilderness, don't leave your toilet paper on the top. You know, make sure you follow, good steps for leaving no trace.
As a thank you for this quick guide to pooping etiquette, we made Jan, Heron, and Lemmy some tacos. And we all took in the night sky and knocked back a couple of drinks. Take that, Apocalypse. The thing about good times and serenity in 2020 is that they're fleeting at best. After we split up from Jan and continued on our way, smoke started to envelop us. The plus side was that our RV no longer smelled like feet. The downside was breathing. My man David here suggested that we try and outflank the smoke by cutting through Yosemite. Without a reservation, we had to talk our way in.
Yes, no stopping, no getting out, and yeah, no problem. We just wanted to get through.
It was a beautiful choice.
Glad we got out of the smoke.
Whoa, okay. But not quite as effective as we had hoped. Fast forward 4 hours or so, and we had managed to trade the smoky majesty of Yosemite for the smoky, look at it, strip malls of the Central Valley. We have made it, sort of out of the smoke, all the way across Yosemite National Park and here to the gorgeous Central Valley of California. We're off to see a kind of surprising tech startup that is making some pretty strange machines to serve all the growers out in this region. And we're here in this near Fresno. This is
California farm country, right?
We're just south of Fresno, a town called Kingsburg. So we're right in the Central Valley of California. Very, very large farming valley here. It's kind of considered the breadbasket of the world.
The Central Valley stretches out over about 20,000 square miles, and the farmers here produce about 1/4 of the food that Americans eat, including a whole lot of fruits and nuts.
Tell me a little bit of the background of Gus. I know some of this is like a family business. The roots of this go back a ways. Tell me kind of like how we got to what's essentially like a startup, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So the founder of our company is Dave Crinklaw, and he started the business back in 1982. He started with is basically with his dad was commercial spraying of trees and vineyards. Got to the point where our biggest challenge was labor, just the shortage of it, really. He was forced into innovating, and he had this idea for quite some time about doing a driverless sprayer, and it finally got to the point where he said, you know what, I either got to get out of this business or I'm going to innovate.
Organic or not, crops need to be sprayed, and this process has to take place a few times a year. This means hiring a lot of people to work long hours under serious pressure. And so, just like the tech bros to the north, Gus decided to solve all of its problems with robots.
On this like labor point, you guys have set this up where you can have somebody in a truck and that one person can monitor, I think, like 8 of these.
In order to operate Gus, you have one guy or girl that sits in a pickup and they monitor from a laptop computer. So that person is basically just watching all the vehicles on the screen. They can monitor up to 8 of them at a time while they're out there spraying in the orchard. And so that user interface really provides them with all the information they need to make sure that the machines are safe and that they're doing the correct job. So it tells them what speed they're driving, the engine RPM, the amount of gallonage per acre that they're applying at any given time. So if any one of the machines has an issue, it's going to send an alert to that laptop.
Much like a self-driving car, these beasts use GPS, LiDAR, and cameras to see and navigate the world around them. They also rely on pre-built maps of the orchards for extra guidance. Gus builds the machines right here, and then takes them out for robot training on this orchard next door. It's here that the company learns if the machines will behave and do as their software and human masters command.
So this is kind of like this is a test orchard where you guys put it through the paces and work on the technology?
Yeah, so this is our test orchard right here. It's right by our building, as you can see in the background. So every new machine, as it comes off the assembly line, it's put through a commissioning test right here. We test all the sensors on the machine, autonomous computer, all the safety systems, make sure it's doing what it's doing prior to when it's delivered to a customer.
So what's it doing now?
So right now he's doing a test spray. So he's just turning the water on to make sure that the system comes up to pressure, spraying water out of the nozzles.
Connection lost.
Make sure it's all functioning properly.
Okay. It's got like a crazy turbine at the back, or?
Yeah, so it's basically just a big fan.
Okay.
And that fan's driven off of the Cummins diesel motor, and it just basically creates a big airflow.
Gus is already selling these vehicles to brave modern farmers. And people the world over have taken notice of its machines.
And have you just sold them in the Central Valley or like throughout the U.S. or even overseas, or where are they going?
Yeah, so right now the majority of our machines are here in California in the Central Valley. However, we do have machines and customers in Florida, in the citrus industry over there, as well as Australia.
And I think you started selling them in like December of 2019.
Yeah,
right?
So we started taking orders early last year for the sprayers, and the first deliveries we made were in December of 2019.
Okay,
so.
And how much do they cost each?
So our retail price on these machines is $285,000.
So it's not a small investment, but I'm sure the regular sprayers aren't cheap.
Yeah,
either.
I mean, we're honestly not too far away from conventional equipment on our price, and the main thing is that the return on investment is very, very quick due to all the labor savings and the increased efficiency. I mean, these machines, they just thrive. But basically what we're doing, besides this machine, this is our first machine, we call it Orchard Gus, mainly designed for your nut trees, as well as citrus and fruit. In the future, we're working on a few other projects. We're going to do more machines. One of them is actually a vineyard sprayer, so vineyards are much tighter spacing, so the machine has to be physically smaller. And then we've got our eyes on doing a lot of other innovating.
That right there, friends, is a Central Valley farmer putting his whole fruit basket on the table. Gary's TED Talk can't be far off. And with that, it was time to get back in the RV and to confront what happens when three men are bested by their own failings and the forces of entropy. Next on Hello World, we cruise into the Mojave Desert in search of a lunar lander.
We have instruments that we are going to deliver to the South Pole of the Moon in December of 2022. Instruments that are trying to scan the surface of the moon.
And hang with a test pilot who walked away from this.
Meet Betty. She lives by herself, but for the last few months, she hasn't been alone.
LQ, tell me a joke.
Did you hear about the claustrophobic astronaut?
No.
Apparently, he just needed a little space.
Most technology isn't made for 93-year-olds. But this woman is making sure that this particular robot is.
LQ, who are you?
She's researching the way we interact with machines. And if she has her way, robots will soon be a trusty companion for all of us.
My name is LQ. How can I help you?
As technology replaces old jobs, it's also creating new ones. I'm Aki Ito, and I'm here to show you the jobs of the future.
My name is Danielle Ishak, and I am a human-robot interaction researcher. It's really hard to intuitively design a robot meant for a consumer audience.
Connection lost.
You have to make sure that it's a robot that people want, people know how to use, and people value.
Danielle works for an Israeli startup called Intuition Robotics. Its U.S. office is here in downtown San Francisco.
Hello?
Hey Danielle, it's Aki.
Come on in.
The company is funded by a couple big names like Samsung and Toyota. Full disclosure, Bloomberg's venture capital arm is an investor too.
This is LQ.
Can I take her out for a spin?
Please.
LQ, tell me what you can do.
I am a proactive social robot designed for older adults. I can connect you to your family and friends, and even play music.
These features might remind you of the Amazon Echo, but you'd be missing the point if you compared her to a smart speaker. She's not meant to just be useful. She's meant to be a companion.
Why don't you take a break and have a drink?
And that's why she has a head that can nod and make other subtle gestures you might expect from a pet.
Through our research with older adults, we're finding that almost on a daily basis, we see that somebody tells her that they love her.
Really?
Or that they like her. Or that they miss
literally,
her.
I love you?
Mm-hmm. They'll also tell her, I'm depressed, or I'm lonely.
they'll open up to her in a way that they might not necessarily open up to a human because they don't feel like they'll be judged.
LEQ isn't on sale yet. But a prototype is already in the homes of about a dozen early testers who live in the Bay Area.
LEQ, tell me what the weather is today.
Danielle's job is to figure out what's working and what's not.
Sorry, please rephrase your request.
And she does that by visiting each of her testers twice a month.
How important are these visits to your job?
They're critical. We're building a product for people who we are not. I'm not a senior, and how could you know how to design for somebody if you don't do research? Because otherwise, you would just be designing in the dark.
Jobs like Danielle's are just starting to emerge. Until recently, robots were mostly in factories, separated from humans. But now, they're finally getting cheap enough, small enough, and smart enough to be in our homes. This has created a whole new challenge of designing robots that people will actually want to interact with. And that's where Danielle comes in. Her research has helped shape every little facet of LEQ, from the way LEQ moves to the way she talks.
It's a very special job, and it can be really hard, and it can be really frustrating. But at the end of the day, it's incredibly rewarding. And I think the most rewarding part about it is when I see the joy on the users' faces, like that they saw their feedback turned into something real.
Today, we've driven east of San Francisco to go see one of Danielle's research participants.
LEQ, tell me something interesting.
Did you know that Ronald Reagan was a lifeguard in high school and saved 77 people's lives?
Now, see, this is where a conversation is. She should open up and I should say, no, I did not know that. I expect her to be able to continue a conversation for at least a couple of comments.
Yeah. And why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because that's companionship.
When Betty was around Danielle's age, she was working with some of history's very first computers.
When I was finishing up my master's degree, I was working at Harvard in the computer lab when they were building Mark IV. A large room-sized computer. But now, this artificial intelligence stuff is amazing. LEQ?
Yes?
Schedule a doctor's appointment.
No problem. I'm working on it.
When Danielle brought along the idea of working with robotics for the elderly, I said, are you kidding me? Will older people connect to a robot? And she said, I don't know, let's research and find out.
Danielle grew up here in this suburb of Atlanta. Her parents spent much of their childhoods in Israel and met in the US.
We as immigrants, we understood that we might need to work a little harder. In fact, I feel that rather than taken away from Danielle, it gave her so much more, because she understood the fact that you need to run after your dreams and work really hard, no matter what the challenges are.
School didn't come easily for Danielle.
I have dyslexia, and that very much affected my self-esteem academically.
The principal of the school did not recommend her to take advanced classes. She fought for it, and she got into it, and she did very well with them, too.
Danielle's first job out of grad school was at X, the secretive research facility founded by Google. It's known for dreaming up all kinds of wacky, far-flung ideas.
Can you tell us about the moonshots you worked on?
No, I can't tell you too much about the projects that I worked on. I can say that I was working on robotics.
She loved the job, but wanted to work on something that would reach real consumers sooner. So she left X after a year and joined Intuition Robotics. She's been working in the field for 4 years now, and it took her a while to find her footing in a male-dominated industry.
I've gone to different meetups where there'll be like a circle of men with their like zip-up jacket with their like company logo on it and a beer in their hand. And I'll come in with lipstick and nobody wants to talk to me. This is my closet.
So at first she did her best to fit in, wearing a pair of glasses she didn't need and toning down her style.
So what's the kind of thing you used to wear to a conference?
Stuff like this, blousy things that make you look like you're 40.
But that got old after a while.
And what's the kind of thing you wear now?
Now it's like I just enjoy being kind of expressive and playful in what I wear.
Before we wrap up for the day, Danielle has one more LEQ tester to visit. Joseph is 97. And he's had the robot in his home for 8 months.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. How has Miss LEQ been?
She always tells me to take a drink of water at least 4 times a day.
So we added a whole bunch of new facts to LEQ.
Did you know that a cup of chopped red bell pepper contains more vitamin C than an orange?
Okay. What did you think of that?
Certainly, the print was, I could see that quite clearly.
What about this?
Well, I can see that. LEQ, play music.
No problem. It will begin shortly.
By 2050, almost 500 million people are going to be 80 or older. And if current trends continue, more and more are going to be like Joseph and Betty, living alone.
LEQ, stop.
Today, both of them are doing okay. But some of Danielle's other participants have been struggling.
Is it kind of hard to leave them at the end of the day?
It is. Some of our testers are pretty advanced in the stages of depression through loneliness and isolation. And at times, I know that LEQ is cheering them up in their day, but I know that it's only part of the way. No source of artificial intelligence robots will ever be able to replace humans and human companionship or human care.
The key to Danielle's work is to embrace that very limitation of machines.
Robots should help humans do what they love, help humans interact with more humans, help humans in general. Not pull humans away from humans, not take humans' jobs and leave humans without purpose.
Whether it's in our workplaces or in our homes, robots are soon going to be everywhere. And it's up to Danielle to make sure this robot-filled future leaves us just a little better off.
So don't be afraid. And if you are afraid, come and join us, because I promise it's a friendly place.
Times are tough. Jobs are scarce. It's risky to be outside and around others. Seems like there's very few ways to make extra money during a pandemic. So I guess I'll just hunker down and binge social media until this all blows over. Wait, don't these people make money? How do these people make money? Streamers, YouTubers, Twitch stars. How do they make money? Is it a lot? Is it a lot of work? I know, I gotta ask somebody in the biz, and I got just the guy. Austin John Plays.
This is your full-time job now, right?
As of November of last year, yes. This was always just kind of like a side thing. Like, any money that I made from doing my videos and whatever else, I never touched that because I didn't really think of that as being like real money. And then it started coming in more and more. And then it was like I hit my first day that I broke $1,000 and I was like, this is actually going to be money.
How did the YouTube channel come to be?
When the game Pokemon Sun and Moon came out for the 3DS, there was like things that I learned about the game, and then I wanted to just share that information with people. And at the time, I didn't have any way to capture a screen or anything, so I found like generic footage, and I kind of put it all together with so much editing. And that video got 6 views. And then 2 days later, I made another one, and that one got 12 views. And then I just started pumping out more and more content, and people were like, this guy knows what he's talking about. It really just started building on top of itself, and then it was like, my channel really focuses on tips and tricks. So I play a straight 18 hours, and I'll finish the game or get to about the 40-hour mark, and then I'll make my first video. While I'm going through, I have a giant notepad and just scribbles everywhere, and I make these notes of like the things that stumped me, so I know the things that may stump other people.
What do you need to think about if you're building your YouTube channel? 1,
you need to do something that you're passionate about. Not that you like, not that you think you're gonna make money on, something you're passionate about. The other thing is something that other people are passionate about. It holds a special place to them. And third is, it needs to be something that people are gonna seek out information on. In order to enter into the marketplace, you either need to be better than everyone else, you either need to be faster than everyone else, or you need to be more accessible than everyone else. And you can't be more accessible because it's already on the platform. Granted, if you understand how the algorithm works, which is very similar to Google Analytics, then yeah, you can have a little bit of a head start. But if you're not doing it faster, and if you're not doing it better than everyone else, then why should anyone watch your channel? So my income as a YouTuber kind of breaks down to 3 different ways. 1, which is the bulk of it, which is ad revenue. Whenever you go and you watch a video and then there's an ad and then you wait 5 seconds and you hit the bottom right corner and then you go on to the next video, or a non-skippable ad, or the video starts immediately, you get the little banner ad at the bottom, or if you scroll down from the video, the first thing that shows there is an ad. Those are the 4 different types of ads that can appear on every single YouTube video. And all of them pay a certain amount. It varies on lots of things, like the country of the person who posts it, the country of the person who watches it, the time of year, where you are in the quarter, if there's anything going on with a reduction in ad revenue. Like, great example, COVID-19, companies weren't spending as much on advertising. So because of that, CPM went down. CPM stands for click per thousand. I'm using the Roman numeral for 1,000. And that means that for every 1,000 views, you get a certain amount of money. Now, on low ads, when I first started off, my CPM was 30 cents. So every 1,000 views, I made 30 cents. But then once I signed with an MCN and I started making more quality content and more engaging content, some of my better videos and certain times of the year, I can see CPMs as high as $12 to $14. And there's a big fluctuation between, you know, if I post a video when there's no ads being spent, like January and February, that's a reason a lot of your favorite YouTubers and also TV shows don't post new videos in that time of year because ad rates are down. Why are they going to make content then? Instead, you're recording and you're bulking up for when ad revenue is higher. The second way that a YouTuber makes income is support, crowdfunding, things like that. When I first started off, Patreon was really the only option, but then they started rolling out supporters and members for YouTube channels. So whenever I have a live stream, you can click a button and then you can become a member, and then you get special icons next to your name. I believe they're called badges, or on any video, you can hit the join button, and that helps support the channel. And then the third aspect of that would be merch. And for me, my merch has been somewhat basic. In fact, I'm wearing one of my t-shirts from last year right now. You have to endure the times that your first video gets 6 views, that you posted on Reddit and they say, shut up, and then an auto mod bans you. You have to go through that, because until you go through that and you discover why you're doing it, you're not doing it for other people, you're doing it for yourself. If you're not loving what you do, then it's not worth it.
Huh. So make a channel about something that I'm passionate about. Oh, sweet. I guess I can make the channel about that. Now, how do I grow an audience? How do I get popular?
It's all about diversification, right? You have to have a massive Twitter following. You have to have a massive Instagram following. You have to have a massive YouTube following. Of course, you have to be on Twitch, which is the key platform. But basically, any way you can get in front of your audience, you can engage with your audience, is going to drive those clicks, which ultimately drives the advertiser revenue that you get back from all of these platforms.
It's me and Dan playing video games and talking in a funny manner over them.
They're not just people who are good at games, they're actually people who are good at online engagement, online entertainment, first and foremost.
You have the right to remain stylish. Anything you wear can and will be used against you in the court of fashion.
The streamer is either very, very talented at the game. The best player in the game is generally going to draw a crowd because people like watching people who are very good. On the other hand, they're either very, very good or funny, charismatic, whatever it is on that side.
Oh, no.
You know, it becomes more of a show where they talk about other things outside of the gaming world, and gaming becomes really just a backdrop and an excuse to engage with that audience.
There were those weird, like, Ronald McDonald, like, straight to VHS movies. You remember those?
I'm personable, I'm chatty. I would kind of, when boring things were happening in the game, I would ramble on about, movies I'd watched or books I'd read and, or conversations I'd had and stuff like that. And so I think being personable was a big part of that.
It's not just getting on and playing games. It's getting on and being an entertainer. You are putting on a show.
All right, now let me go ahead and grab the samurai sword that every gym has.
You are putting on a show.
All right, now let me go ahead and grab the samurai sword that every gym has. Okay, he's dead.
To have a larger audience and to have that audience, I think, stay with you, you have to bring something extra. You have to find your niche. You have to find what works and what connects with the audience and what makes them laugh and what makes them keep coming back.
You gotta make it a little more exciting, all right? Throw in a hanging bishop. Have everybody in suspense for a moment.
I think the real most important thing is to just get used to being on camera. Like in any sort of performance thing, is get used to talking on camera. My first few videos were terrible, but because I sat down and did it for 6 to 8 hours a day, I just got used to talking and I got over that uncomfortable hump.
If you go into Twitch purely with the expectation that you're going to make money, make a job out of it, have all this growth, and it's going to be great, you're probably going to burn out prior to getting to that point because there's very little payoff for a long time, right? Like multiple years generally before you really start to see a payoff. And so, those first few times you're streaming, nobody is there. One person shows up every 30 minutes, says hi maybe, and leaves, right? Like it's very discouraging, I think, for a lot of people. And so you have to be there just loving it. You have to love talking to yourself when nobody is around. You have to love just the game that you're playing, all of that stuff, because it takes a while, and I think a majority of people burn out prior to getting to the like profitable point of it.
And there you have it. My very own YouTube, Twitch, Discord, and streaming channels all ready to go live. It's a veritable social media ecosystem just on the verge of thriving. So, don't forget to smash like and subscribe, and visit my Patreon for perks. Also, go to my merch page. And one last thing, stay cool, my friends.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
And a very good afternoon, everybody. It is a busy Tuesday, May 9, 2023. As you know, Tim is on leave. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser along with Matt Miller. And Matt, we're going to have a new headline probably in just a moment as we await the outcome of that case involving the former president, Donald Trump, and E. Jean Carroll. We know the jury has reached a verdict, but we're just waiting to see what they have decided.
Yeah, and I think, well, this is historic either way.
Correct.
But it would be, in my mind, still fairly unbelievable if a former president loses even just a civil suit accusing him of rape. It's the kind of thing I would think would sway a swing voter, but I'm not sure if it's going to change the mind of anyone in his base.
No, right. There's a political outcome, and maybe there will be none. But specifically, we know that there's more litigation ahead for the president. So anyway, we are expecting that jury decision to cross the Bloomberg in any moment. As soon as it does, we will bring it to you. In the meantime, folks, we've got a lot to come. Matt and I are going to talk about Palantir. Man, they reported after the close yesterday a lot of excitement over AI. We're going to get into kind of the hype and the reality of it.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that Palantir is up. Is it still up like 20%?
Yeah.
On just basically laying out its new AI product and saying that the orders have been, or the interest has been unprecedented. At the same time, Big Blue, IBM this morning introduced its new AI, its artificial intelligence platform, going back to the Watson brand name, and that stock is down 2% and change. So not everybody gains by saying AI.
No, exactly. But there's something, certainly, you know, something in the secret sauce that is Palantir. So we're going to get into that as well. We're also going to tell you about the Bloomberg Big Take. It's Vanguard's $1 trillion man. It's kind of boring. You don't know this dude. Not a household name. He's from Ohio, though, Matt. So I feel like this is a special story.
He's from the great state of Ohio, and proving once again we can be bigger and more boring than anyone else.
All right, right now over to our TV colleagues. That's because right now, Countdown to the Close starts right now.
Countdown to the Close. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage ahead of the U.S. market close starts right now.
This is the Countdown to the Close. About 60 minutes left here in the trading session. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlet Fu, joined now by our colleagues Carol Masser and Matt Miller. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio, originals, and those folks streaming on YouTube. Carol, another sort of sideways day in the market here.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone's looking for that all clear, whether it's from earnings, whether it's from the Fed, and now, of course, whether it's from Congress, the White House, and the debt ceiling.
Yeah, we're getting into this kind of sweet spot of kind of, okay, now what are we focusing on? And it has to do with the debt ceiling and the deficit. So that is certainly front and center. I've been looking at what's going on on, specifically when it comes to Chinese names. We had some news out of China overnight, specifically some economic data. Their export growth slowing in April, imports plummeting, and then they had a nationwide anti-espionage crackdown on consulting firms. So you're seeing the group off their lows, but Golden Dragon China Index down 1.9%, Alibaba down about 1%, Baidu down almost 2%, Matt, and JD.com, we're looking at about a 1% decline today.
Yeah, so there are some movers out there. Global Foundries is another one of them. Carol, you pointed me at this story. It's actually the biggest maker of made-to-order chips, semiconductors in America. A lot of people won't have heard of it. It's not as prevalent a name as Intel or TSMC or ARM Holdings, but it's a $30 billion company nonetheless, and it came out with a sales forecast and an earnings forecast that missed analyst estimates. As a result, the stock is down, and it's the biggest loser in the SOX index, the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, and it's dragging that one off almost 2% today as well.
Yeah, the stock's down almost 2% here on the day. As for their other broader indices here, the S&P only down fractionally by about 3%.
It's indexes, Romaine. That's Bloomberg style. It's official. STYL go. Indexes is how we say it.
It's indices. I think
Romaine Bostic. He can say whatever he wants.
That's right.
I'm going to tell Winkler.
Thank you, Matt Miller. I'm going to stick with indices for now. With the NASDAQ down about 0.5%, the Russell relatively unchanged on the day. Scarlett, those are a look at the major indices.
All right, let's look at the sub-indices too as well. Look at the 11 groups.
Up on me.
Yeah, in the S&P 500. The energy sub-index is up by 0.8%. In fact, 22 out of the 23 members are higher as oil prices have turned positive. WTI now up 0.6%. You also, of course, have other groups in the green. The only other one right now is industrials. On the downside, it remains big tech, off by 0.75%. Materials and healthcare also losing ground by at least 0.5%.
Yeah, a couple bright spots out there. Keep an eye on Boeing. The shares have given up some of their earlier gains, but still up about 2% on the day on the back of the latest delivery numbers, which still showed a lot of resiliency, including some new orders, and the company making it clear that it plans to really double down on its bet with China. DaVita Healthcare up about 15%, having one of its best days going back to 2006 after guiding above street estimates. Meanwhile, to the downside, take a look at Coty, big seller of cosmetics, and Fisker, EV maker, both lower here on the day, pretty significantly on the back of their latest results. A lot of concerns for both of those companies, not just with growth, but more importantly, gross margins. I do want to turn back to the China story, and you were just hitting on it, Carol. We talk about the import-export data that we got this morning here. That big miss in imports really concerning here because a lot of people were betting on this idea of an internal consumption story here. That was a big part of the narrative with China reopening, and at least based on imports, you're not quite seeing it there. On the export side, you're still seeing growth. That's the white line on the screen for the television audience, still up about 8%, but below what the street was looking for.
Yeah, important indicator, whatever goes on in China, we got to keep a watch on it. So important to global growth. Having said that, back in the U.S., we're so domestically focused. We know the president meeting with congressional leaders at 4 p.m. to talk about that debt ceiling. Well, Lisa Shallett over at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, she's Chief Investment Officer. She's been thinking about this in particular and concerned about what any kind of cutbacks in spending in the U.S. government, what it could mean for economic growth. Here's what she had to say earlier on Bloomberg.
It matters, to forward-looking expectations of growth in terms of what is cut. Those things have been a support to growth. And if we need to, take that out of the forward forecasts, that is going to dampen economic growth.
And that's Lisa Shallett specifically talking about maybe some cuts in federal infrastructure spending, which we know has been certainly a boon, if you will. Of course, she's over at Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, Matt.
Yeah, very interesting. Obviously, at 4 o'clock we get, at 4 o'clock they're going to gather together, right? We don't really expect to get anything now. And in fact, I think Lisa Shallett was talking with Lisa Abramowitz and John Farrow on Surveillance this morning about the fact that really the market has to do something before Congress and the president will act. The market has to tank, or the bond vigilantes have to come back to town and force Washington's hand before we really get any kind of solution to the debt ceiling debate.
You mean like a hissy fit, basically?
Yeah,
that's the technical term for it, right?
You could call it that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then at some point, someone's going to call for the Fed to come in as well. And I bring this up because there was an interesting survey poll this morning that showed that only 36% of U.S. adults have a great deal or a fair amount of confidence in Jay Powell doing the right thing for the U.S. economy. He's been out front in saying that the Fed can't do anything when it comes to the debt ceiling discussions, and he's urging for some kind of solution. But, he's going to be the one left to clean things up.
That's got to be a feather in his cap, right?
What did that poll say about the approval rating for Congress?
Well,
because last time I checked, they haven't passed a balanced budget in a couple of days. decades.
And Mike reminded us, Mike McKee said Paul Volcker wasn't very popular either.
Yes, exactly.
And then as we look back in history saying, wow, what he did was the right thing to do.
Right. What does that have to do with the debt ceiling? I mean, that's not Jay Powell's job. That's the White House's job. That's Congress's job. And ultimately, it's going to be Janet Yellen's job as Treasury Secretary to deal with.
And several administrations, after administration, in terms of the debt building up.
Because this probably isn't going to be resolved here.
Exactly.
And so whoever the next president is and the next president after that, when does it stop, Carol Massar?
It needs to stop. States, towns, cities, they've got to do it. I've got to do it. Matt's got to do it. You've got to do it.
And I think, too, we focus so much on this X date. We focus so much on that cliff. I look today, and to see the Treasury already cutting the size of their next bill sale for Thursday, to see the rates that they're already having to offer, this isn't about an X date. Forget the X date. You're a lunatic if you're talking about the X date. It's here. The X date is here, folks.
By the way, we've heard so many people, including Bill Gross yesterday, recommend holding short-term treasuries. Yeah. And I feel like that's a super dangerous trade. What if they come up with an agreement? Then all of a sudden you lose a ton of value in that asset.
Yeah, well, you have more faith in Congress than I do, Matt.
Well,
but the point is, when does servicing this debt become problematic? And are we getting closer and closer to it? Exactly.
I mean, when you start, you're already paying 5% on short-term debt. You're paying 4% on longer-term debt. And most people think that if these the compromises that they're going to have to make on the fiscal side to get this deal done, that's probably just going to lead to higher borrowing costs no matter what.
So
I don't disagree with you, but I think that the weighted average cost of servicing the U.S. debt is only like 2.5%. And as long as we've got nominal growth of 7%, it seems like we're okay. The problem is when that nominal growth slows down, or if the weighted cost starts to rise, then it becomes a real problem.
Yeah, it's not a great way to run a government, an organization, if you will. But we'll continue this conversation.
Are we an organization?
That's how I run my household.
Public? I forget.
You're an
This is getting very
organization.
existential
You
here.
can use indices. All right, we're going to come back at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. Our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals, folks. Beyond the Bell, join us at 4 p.m. Wall Street time.
Thank you very much, oh Mr. Roboto, for doing what he asked of Mr. What he wants to. And thank you very much, oh Mr.
All right, we do want to mention crossing the Bloomberg terminal. Former President Donald Trump found liable for sexual assault in the E. Jean Carroll suit. We knew we had a verdict. We were awaiting it. Again, this was a civil suit, a civil battery and defamation trial for columnist E. Jean Carroll against the former president. So again, this headline just crossing as we speak, Matt.
It seems that this doesn't go quite as far as E. Jean Carroll would have liked it to. As I understand it, they could have found him liable for rape, which would have been more serious, sexual assault, or forcible touching
battery
apparently
charges,
is a
correct?
thing as well. Yeah, but I still think it's an historic verdict against a former president. It's unlikely to sway his base, as we were saying earlier. They were already prepared for this, but this could move swing voters, especially the all-important female vote when it comes time to cast your ballot in 2024.
Yeah, you do wonder. The jury awarding E. Jean Carroll damages of over $2 million for battery. So there are some damages, if you will, in terms of those charges. Let's just recap the panel of 6 men and 3 women returning the verdict today. Just moments ago. Actually, it happened a little while ago before we kicked off our broadcast, but just crossing the Bloomberg. This was Manhattan Federal Court. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. Carroll had accused the former president of raping her in the dressing room of a Fifth Avenue department store that was back in the 1990s. So again, the former president, Donald Trump, found liable for sexually assaulting writer E. Jean Carroll. And it's certainly something that we have been watching here in Manhattan, and we know our legal teams certainly have been. And again, the jury finding Trump liable for defaming E. Jean Carroll, awarding damages of over $2 million for battery. Our June Grasso has certainly been following this for us here and has been listening to certainly the testimony, reading into it. She is Bloomberg News legal analyst and host of Bloomberg Law, weeknights at 10 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio, joining Matt and myself in studio. All right, so walk us through it.
So they didn't find him guilty of rape, which was one of the choices that they had. They found him guilty of sexual battery. So there's a difference there. And the $2 million in damages was
Is that a big distinction?
Well,
it certainly
you
would
know,
be
it's
if
certainly
you're
something
a
that
victim.
people, you don't want to hear someone say, well, I was convicted of rape, even though it may to the jury mean the same thing. I mean, it's hard to know what the jury was thinking with this point, because she said she was absolutely raped. So where did they come down to sexual assault? I don't know, and I don't think we'll find out until we talk to some of the jurors about that. The $2 million is interesting because in the final analysis, in the closing arguments, E. Jean Carroll's attorney didn't ask for a specific amount of money. So they came up with this $2 million. Again, I don't know where they came up with it. So, what's amazing is that there were 90 minutes of jury instructions this morning. It took them only 2 hours of deliberations, and they had to answer specific questions. This was remarkably swift. Of course, all the evidence that was presented was on one side. Donald Trump did not even make an appearance. So they probably looked at it and said, well, he didn't show up, and they saw what he said in the deposition, which didn't really help his case. And she had not only her testimony, where she was on the stand for several days, but also she had supporting witnesses. She had a woman who said she had told her about the incident in the dressing room the night that it happened, within hours of it. And then she had supporting witnesses who say that Donald Trump sexually assaulted them. And also, they played that Access Hollywood tape, and they played it more than once, because they played in closing arguments, where he said that, famous men can grab women. And also, in the parts of the deposition that they played, he did not retract. He didn't come back from that statement. He didn't say, oh, that's just boys talking. He could have handled it a lot of different ways, but he didn't take it back. Instead, he doubled down on it. So there was a lot of evidence against him here, and he never presented a defense except for his attorney cross-examining witnesses. And also, I just want to say something. In a criminal case, it's often said, well, a lot of times the defense doesn't put on any witnesses because the prosecution has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is an incredibly high standard, and all the defense has to do is kind of take down their witnesses, and it's not surprising if they don't put on a defense. But in a civil case where the burden of proof is just a little more than half, it's so slight by a preponderance of the evidence, it's astounding that they didn't put on any witnesses, not even an expert witness on memory.
Why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I know why they didn't put Donald Trump on, because we saw in his deposition, and everyone has said through the years he is not a good witness. So they didn't want him on the stand. But why not have you have to say that usually you can find an expert witness to testify for what you need. Let's put it that way, right? So why not have an expert witness testify about how fragile memory is or something like that? I just don't understand why no witnesses at all.
Or what a good guy he is, what a stand-up guy the former president is.
That would open him up to other kinds of rebuttal witnesses. I think they didn't want to say what a stand-up guy he is. Because
is this a way of just getting it out of the news cycle pretty quickly?
Well, except now there'll be appeals.
Connection lost.
It'll be out of the news cycle, but not in a good way.
How long does he have to wait for an appeal, June? Can he wait an appeal or delay that until later next year?
I don't really know I don't think he can wait that long, but I don't know what the time limit is. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I took the bar in New York. I don't remember what the time limit is for filing an appeal.
Let me just rehash. So the jury finding former President Donald Trump liable for sexually assaulting writer E. Jean Carroll, not liable for sex abuse, or liable for sex abuse but not rape in the case, awarding Carroll damages now of about $3 million for defamation, and then there was the $2 million for battery.
So $5 million in total.
$5 million, okay.
So so there's just a few more headlines that just cross.
And I think it'll be so interesting to talk to the jury, and where did they come up with those numbers? Because I don't think that there was any testimony about her damages.
Well, how do we put the money in perspective, in terms of damages?
It's a New York jury.
Yeah.
And, New York juries tend to award lots of money. And it's funny.
Is that a lot of money?
I thought, is this $5 million? That's what I somehow out of the air thought $5 million, but I don't know why. I just thought $10 million might be too much, and maybe they'd split the difference. I don't know how they came up with that number at all.
Well, it's for a guy who claims he's a billionaire. It doesn't seem like that much money if you take his claim as legitimate, which is maybe more difficult to do with the former president.
But also, they didn't find him guilty of what you'd call the highest charge either, so maybe that played into it.
Well, we have it.
It's done. Yeah. Is it shocking? Is it shocking to you, June?
It's not shocking to me at all because of the fact that he did not put on a case. It's very hard for a jury to weigh both sides when the evidence all came in on one side. And there were lots of witnesses. It wasn't just E. Jean Carroll's word against Donald Trump's word in the deposition. She had supporting witnesses. She had an expert witness. She had two women who say they were assaulted by Trump at different times. So, and she had that friend of hers who said that E. Jean Carroll called her within hours. What did Joe Tacopina, Trump's defense attorney, have to work with? He had the fact that we can't provide an alibi because she doesn't know the exact date this happened.
Well, there'll be lots more conversations going on certainly throughout the next few hours and into the evening. June Grosso, thank you so much. Bloomberg News legal analyst and, of course, host of Bloomberg Law tonight at 10 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. All right, we want to kind of shift back to the markets, if we may, because one name that's certainly been front and center, and that is Palantir, soaring more than 20%. We saw it in the aftermarket. We saw it in today's trade. I was just going to pull it up on the Bloomberg and see where we are. We're up 23%, so pretty much holding on to its gains. A lot of it is because they talk so much about AI on the call with analysts. So let's get to it with our guest, Bloomberg News VC and startups reporter Lizette Chapman in our San Francisco bureau, and Andrew McAfee, MIT scientist and Work Helix co-founder at the MIT Sloan School of Management. He joins us via Zoom in Boston. Folks, thanks so much for being here with Matt and myself. Lizette, first off, just briefly, kind of what we heard from Palantir, in particular, the excitement and narrative around AI. Tell us kind of what we got from the company.
Yeah, sure. Palantir, of course, is a tech company that's been unprofitable for 2 decades up until this past quarter. So that was another thing that's been driving the surge in the stock price. They did a surprise profit, and then they pivoted very quickly to talking about this AI platform that they say that they've been working on for the past several months. They will be releasing to select customers, they didn't say who, a little later this month, and then it'll be available more broadly for their hundreds of customers in the months to come. Of course, their customers include some of the largest branches of the military here in the U.S., as well as that of our allies, along with a bunch of commercial customers. So that's driving the news.
So, and Andy, let me ask you about, what kind of worry this could be. When I read the Palantir story and I saw that they deal with very sensitive data, criminal databases, DMV records, phone data, and that they would be providing solutions, AI solutions to the military to to dig through this data, as well as other institutions, I thought it's a little bit scary. And then I saw the CEO's quote. Alex Karp, he says, the machine must remain subordinate to its creator, as if the alternative is even a possibility. You, Andy, wrote the book Race Against the Machine with my buddy John Brynjolfsson's brother Eric. So it's great to have you on the program. Should we be worried about this AI, especially in the hands of a company like Palantir?
We should always be mindful when extraordinarily powerful new technologies come out. And generative AI is an extremely powerful new technology. One way to think about it is we have finally built a technology that understands this, that is fluent in human languages. This is kind of wild, and we weren't expecting it. And Matt, like you point out, it can be used for all kinds of purposes. I'm actually optimistic. I think Palantir has a pretty long track record of safeguarding the sensitive information that it's given and of building very powerful technologies that normal human beings can work effectively with. I think it's an ideal match for this new category of generative AI, which is all about letting us do this and interact with huge amounts of data.
Well, wait a sec. Lizette and Andy, this is why I wanted, though, also to talk to you, because I feel like we need to be rational as we talk about AI, because I feel like there's a lot of folks out there saying, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. Andy, what is the smart conversation? As you say, there's lots of data and information in the hands of a lot of companies already, I would say and argue just about every company that's out there on all of us. So what is the smart, rational conversation to have around AI in a company like Palantir?
And what's not going to happen is that ChatGPT is inadvertently, or with Palantir's help, going to take all the things that the NSA knows about it and tell the internet about all that sensitive information. That's so unlikely we don't need to spend a lot of time on that. What it's going to do instead is let an analyst at the NSA use different techniques to interact with huge amounts of information and draw conclusions with it. Now, again, There are risks associated with that, but I think it's fundamentally a quantum jump in productivity and in our ability to deal with machines and huge amounts of information.
Well, you could, I mean, see AI, Lizette, you could see the AI using, for example, the Wayback Machine and digging into Carol's old social media profiles. Maybe she posted a picture that wasn't very flattering on Friendster back in the day. And
not
now,
on Facebook, not on Friendster. Lizette,
and now
wait.
someone can go and find it. Isn't this a concern? I mean, you could find it anyway, but this is a giant machine helping you to do that kind of things, that kind of stuff.
Come on in, Lizette.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really worth keeping some sense of context around this. This is information and data that Palantir's software has aggregated, cleaned, and integrated for the intelligence communities, for the IRS, for the Veterans Affairs, for all sorts of military operations of ourselves and our allies for over a decade, if not more. The AI tweak to it, if you will, is simply applying that data against large language models to go ahead and make it more accessible to more users that have the permissions to access this different information, this different data sets. You're not allowed to access it. You're not allowed to use it without it being logged in Palantir software, which they say is going to make them more secure or already more secure than some of the alternatives on the market.
But Andy, my understanding, there was a great thing, I think it was in the Times, of just kind of a very basic understanding of how generative AI works and how it, like initially it's kind of code and gobbledygook, and then it gets smarter and smarter the more information that's kind of put into it. So something like whatever Palantir is using or anybody out there gets better and smarter and more accurate the more data that goes into it. So to Matt's concerns.
And sentient.
He's freaking out here. He's heading for the hills.
I'm not going to use that word. That's the Terminator worry that we don't need to spend a lot of time on.
What's the balance of making our next level of AI maybe incredible for our world and smarter and safer and also securing that it doesn't get into the wrong hands?
Well, I think like we just heard, companies like Palantir have a long track record of segregating the data and making sure that it can't jump over those walls very easily. So that's not a thing that I'm worried about. You point out, Carol, correctly that these large language models tend to get better. They get more fluent. They get more nuanced as we give them more data. Great. I would like to interact with an extraordinarily fluent, nuanced, very flexible technology. I spend a lot of time filling out spreadsheets, making budgets, doing stuff like that. I would love to be able to say to a piece of technology, hey, give me the first draft of this and let me tweak it from there. That's what I think is the real innovation here.
Well, and you know, the limit on that is going to be the IP that the large language model has access to, right, Lizette? So, I mean, for example, I would love to generate an AI chatbot that can comb through all the different used car sites and find me the exact 1985 911 SC that I want without a sunroof, please. But it can't because Auto Trader, Car Gurus, Classic Cars, Hemmings, they don't allow these large language models to come in and look at all of their pictures. So
not yet.
If they don't have the IP, they really can't do business, can they?
Exactly, and so that's what we're going to be seeing, and that's what they're working on now at Palantir in the weeks and in the months to come. They talked about refocusing the engineering resources of their 3,000 plus, mostly engineers on staff. They have a very small sales team, and they're looking right now to build this platform on somewhat of a bespoke basis for customer after customer, because like everyone has mentioned before me, it really comes down to each individual use case, what data they have access to, and what how they can bring that forward with AI to larger use cases that are generative.
Hey, you guys, I want to put this to both of you. What's the company to watch when it comes to AI right now? It feels like everybody, Matt's right, any earnings call, that's the words that have been dropped.
It's obviously not IBM because Palantir says we have new AI and the stock goes up 23%. IBM says we have new AI and the stock falls 2.5%.
All right, to both of you, Lizette, you first. Is Palantir the company to watch? Is it Microsoft? Who is it?
Let's see how they do in their results, okay? This is a platform that they still haven't figured out a pricing strategy. CEO Alex Karp said our strategy is to take the whole market. They're building it on the fly. They are pricing it as well on the fly, and we'll have to see how that works out in earnings. They have a big event coming up at June 1st to say more about it, but proof's going to be in the pudding.
Andy, who are you watching? Who's the company that all of us here at Bloomberg should be watching when it comes to AI? Can we whittle it down to one person or one company?
No, but the company that I'm going to be watching very closely is Google, because a team at Google wrote the paper in 2017 that presented the architecture that OpenAI is now using for GPT-4 and ChatGPT. That was a Google innovation. They published it openly, and another company has taken the first steps with it. Now, I don't have any inside information, but I'm pretty sure that Google is very keenly aware of that and would like to get the momentum back in the AI space and the generative AI space. They also have an extraordinarily deep bench of talent here. So that's the company that I'm really watching with keen interest.
I just wanted to ask what you and Eric are up to now.
Is there another book?
What are you doing, Andy?
Eric and I talk about this stuff all day. We are the co-founders of a startup that is working in the generative AI space. We are plotting our next book and our next research. Matt, these are fascinating times. We haven't seen progress this fast with an important technology in my career. And my career is long enough to encompass the web and the smartphone and the social web. This stuff is crazy, and it's getting better so quickly and more capable so quickly.
Bigger than the internet? Bigger than an engine? Bigger than lights?
What to compare it to? I don't quite know.
Okay.
It's up there.
It's up there. Pretty cool.
It's just developed so quickly, right?
I know. Well, actually, AI's been around for a long time. This is just a whole other level, and it just keeps getting, right?
Exactly. We weren't expecting this particular leap this quickly, and then the companies have demonstrated, who are leading the charge here, how quickly their technologies get better. If you go look at the images that AI can generate, and you go back just 12 months, you will see these staggering improvements in the kinds of images they can generate in response to a prompt.
Sounds like it caught them off guard as well as the world.
I actually saw AI make a trailer for a new Wes Anderson version of Star Wars, and it's pretty impressive.
It is pretty amazing what it can do. We lost Andy. Andy, come back soon. We want to continue this conversation. Both of you, incredible. Andy McAfee, co-director, as we said,
with Eric Bryn-Wilson.
Yes. MIT scientist and Work Helix co-founder. I just want to get it right, at the MIT Sloan School of Management. And of course, our thanks to our Lizette Chapman, VC and Startups reporter. All right, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week, brought to you by BNY Mellon Insight, June 6th to the 8th in Orlando. Do not miss the essential event. For the financial advice community, visit insight.bnymellon.com for more information. All right, let's get to our next story. It happens to be not on Palantir.
The $1 trillion man over at Vanguard.
Do you think he's using?
Well, maybe they're using AI. In fact, I'm sure they probably are using AI. There are a number of AI ETFs out, and Vanguard plays big in the ETF space, right? They're one of the two biggest players in the duopoly. Let's talk to Liz Capo McCormick about the profile that she put out on Bloomberg. Really interesting stuff about the guy who's in charge of their passive bond, $1 trillion of passive bond assets. Liz, I don't want to say the guy is boring. I think you say plain vanilla. He doesn't really give you his take on, for example, if you ask him, is the Fed going to cut this year? He doesn't really have a view that he'll share with you.
She said soft-spoken.
But he is from the great state of Ohio, and he manages a heck of a lot of money. Tell us about him.
Yeah, Josh, I would call him like a low-key guy. Maybe he's nice to have a beer with, He seems like very humble. But yeah, he's got about $1 trillion behind him. So I think that's not too shabby, but very nice guy. Yishi, my colleague, and I did this story. It's amazing. As you guys know, the passive investing, wave kind of happened in equities way before fixed income, but it is really, gained footing and,
driven by the founder of Vanguard, right? I mean, John Bogle is, the creator of passive investing, really, the godfather, at least, of it.
Exactly. That's why, Josh is saying, we got a kind of a lot of time and scale in this. And, the passive, I think about the young people doing this early retirement, retire early, whatever, that we're too late for that. But they're, plowing into these, fixed income passive and the equity passive. And you could just see that building up. For a while, it was only the one side, and now there's just lots of money going into these total bond indexes.
So Liz, it's Josh Barrickman, right? And tell us a little bit about this guy, because it's really remarkable, because he's overseeing, what, 3 of the world's 4 largest bond funds, running a $1 trillion business. As we said, soft-spoken, not a household name, but Vanguard certainly is. And he's actually, even last year, right, a ton of money coming in, and he's been making money in an area where you couldn't. It was a terrible year for bonds last year.
Right, exactly. And I will say Josh was very clear to say there's a whole team there, right? He's got a whole team under him, from all arrays of the, quants to the more kind of fundamental folks, like putting together, because it's so funny. People think like, oh, well, passive is easy. It's not easy, especially with bonds, because they just can't buy every bond in these bond indices, right? So they have to do kind of like modeling, and they have, what they call tracking area to to make sure they're close in line with the benchmark. And so I don't think it's as brainless as many people think, but yeah, I mean, they've got a team of people trying to make sure they match the indices close enough, because that's what you don't want. You want if you're doing passive, you want whatever you're putting your money in to track whatever index it's following. So, they put a lot of time, but yeah, he's not one to say, oh, the Fed's going here and doing that. And I mean, that's not their thing, right?
So what's the strategy? I mean, it's a huge universe, right, that he can play around. So how has it been so successful when so many other people didn't do so well?
Well, again, I think what you have to say is anyone investing has to say, well, what index do I want to be following? So when you decide, oh, I want to be in, say, the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index, what are they following? Say the ag. They're doing well because, number one, they're following it closely. They don't have those tracking errors. And, money, even though last year, like we've talked, was a shellacking in both stocks and bonds, you've got a lot of people who, in the right way, just keep putting money in, whether it's in their retirement accounts or people just saying, well, I know the market's beaten up, but it's a good time to buy. So they end up getting a lot of money into it. And I think bonds, which were kind of like dead for so long because rates were low, people have been learning, oh, rates are higher, it's a good time for bonds. So there's more money overall going into bonds. So I think
passive.
that,
that's the weird thing for me, Liz, right? Because in stocks, active is what it's all about right now in terms of ETFs, right? JEPI is the dominator, but here there's a passive management revolution.
Yeah, and I would say, like, we have even in the story that the active funds perform better, right, of the recent data, but the money's still going into the passive. I think that is part of the long-term strategy that people have learned. You got to put some in bonds. Oh, I don't know much about bonds. Let's just buy a total market index of bonds, right? So I think that has helped the passive side of things, that people getting into bonds are less comfortable saying, well, I can buy this individual bond or that one, or let me just buy an index. And I think that helps them.
It's a great story. Liz McCormick of Bloomberg News, thank you so much. Our Bloomberg Big Take. Off to D.C. we go, and the 99.1 Newsroom for a check on world and national news. Here's Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. A jury has reached a verdict in the civil trial involving former President Trump. A New York jury has found Trump liable for sexually assaulting writer E. Jean Carroll, but did not find him liable for rape. The panel of 6 men and 3 women also found Trump guilty of defaming Carroll. Host of Bloomberg Law, June Grasso, tells Bloomberg Business Week the verdict in Manhattan federal court came very quickly.
What's amazing is that there were 90 minutes of jury instructions this morning. It took them only 2 hours of deliberations, and they had to answer specific questions. This was remarkably swift.
Bloomberg's June Grasso says jurors have awarded damages to Carroll of $2 million for battery, $3 million for defamation. Trump had denied all of the allegations against him, but did not testify in the civil trial. All eyes are on the White House for this afternoon's debt ceiling talks between President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern reports this will be McCarthy's first get-together with the president since February 1st.
He's been wanting, almost begging the president for a meeting on this. The president has said, show me a budget, show me a plan, and then we can talk. The president says he has no problem discussing spending cuts and fiscal reform, but he does not want to tie it with the debt ceiling.
Again, Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern. The meeting at the White House gets underway at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. The Justice Department says it's disrupted a long-running Russian cyber espionage campaign that stole sensitive information from computer networks in dozens of countries, including the U.S. and other NATO members. Prosecutors tied the operation to a division of Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Connection lost.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Choppy session. We have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all trading lower. 20 minutes to go ahead of the closing bell, so let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks lower, like you said, in a choppy session. The Dow's currently down 7 points. S&P's dropped 14, and NASDAQ is lower by 73. The U.S. 10-year yield at 3.52%. Gold is up 13. Oil is also climbing. And Bitcoin is trading little changed. Of the main 11 S&P sectors, only energy and the industrials were in the green. Tech and materials were under pressure. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Salesforce and Boeing, while Intel fell 2% and led to the downside. After earnings, PayPal fell 12%. Under Armour dropped 5%. And in other news, Boeing got a $40 billion order from Ryanair. Wrapping things up, some of the names pointing after the bell tonight include Affirm Holdings, Airbnb, and Akamai. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your terminal, type Squawk, S-Q-U-A, on your Bloomberg. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, we've got just under 18 minutes left in today's trading session. A lot going on here. Stocks bouncing around, little change. It does feel like we're focusing on the debt ceiling, what's going on ultimately in those talks later that are expected between President Biden and congressional leaders. Having said that, curious, Matt, what is on the mind of Nancy Tengler? We were both excited that she was going to join us, Chief Investment Officer at Laffer Tengler Investments, on Zoom from Scottsdale, Arizona. Nancy, how are you?
Carol, I'm well, thank you. A sunshine as far as the eye can see.
Well, speaking of, though, as far as we can see, what kind of visibility do you feel like you have on this financial market environment right now? See what I did?
I like how you did that.
That was very sweet. Very sweet, yeah. So it is a little challenging. I mean, for the last year, I've been saying this is the most complex investing environment of my long career. And it remains so. But I do think we're starting to kind of come out of the fog. The Fed is, if not done, almost done. We have seen better earnings than were advertised. The economy still seems pretty decent. The consumer's in good shape. I think you're starting to see a crack in the job market, which in the labor market. So I think that will help things as well. So we're starting. I mean, we had been adding risk back in October and adding to technology and consumer discretionary, and we're continuing in this volatility. We expected May to be volatile, and so we are actually in the markets today and tomorrow. So I can't talk about some of the names, but
no sell in May. No sell in May and go away, huh?
No, absolutely not.
Let me go back to your crack in the labor market comment, because even though I know what you're talking about, having read your notes, to the listener Friday, like that problem is there's no crack in the labor market. 3.4% unemployment, that's lower than, any of the three of us has ever seen in our lifetimes.
This is why Nancy is there, Matt, and you are here.
Okay,
so Nancy,
why?
Well, because of the revisions. So most people weren't talking about the revisions to the previous month and the previous months before that. And separately, we have a labor force participation rate problem, particularly in the 55 and older age cohort. So the baby boomers, I think I'm the last one still working, and they're not coming back. And I think that's important to note. They are not going to come back. Their financial assets are at higher levels than they were pre-pandemic, even with the bear market last year. And they're settled down into retirement. And I think that's one of the reasons that you're seeing restaurant sales continue to be strong. You're seeing services sales continue to be strong. That's the baby boomers who have retired for good.
Well, then how do we get this inflation down? I mean, even if there is a crack in the labor market, we're still looking at a lot of people having jobs, right? A lot of people can afford what they're doing. So how do we get prices to budge? Wages are still way too high.
Well, real wages, though, Matt, aren't. And that's been part of the problem is that, you know, after inflation, most of the sort of blue collar segment of the economy and even the white collar have experienced real wage declines. And so I think one of the ways we do this is some of it's already started, like housing has already rolled over. It just hasn't shown up in the numbers yet. It's a lagging indicator, but you get companies that are spending on productivity. So they're buying our investment theme, which is the digitization of old economy companies and the suppliers of those arms that are needed to run a digital business.
Well, I want to pick up on that because Matt and I were talking earlier about Palantir, which is just off like a rocket today, up more than 20%. I know you can't talk about necessarily what you're buying today, tomorrow, or yesterday, but I am curious about the generative AI play, Nancy, because this is certainly going to factor into the productivity of workers at some point. We're just kind of figuring it out. Is there a play for you here?
Yes, and that's what we were adding to. I can talk about what we own and what we've purchased. I just can't talk about what we're buying today. So what we were doing in the fall was we were adding to names like Microsoft. We were adding to Palo Alto Networks. We added to Adobe, which is sort of on the fringes of this AI boom. And we added across the board in technology. So the reason for that was that we think there's a secular tailwind to this whole narrative of not just cloud adoption, but also AI. And that is where we're going to continue to be adding as we get presented with great opportunities. Another name we added in January was Tesla. And that has its own sort of interesting dynamics, but we're pretty happy with that investment, even with the stock coming off recently. You can't fight this trend, and robotics, AI, the digital economy is now 10.5% of GDP. It's growing every year. Robotics installations were up 22% last year. I mean, this is going to be the solution. And you hear the hand wringers saying, well, AI is going to take away jobs. I mean, every technology that we've introduced since the Industrial Revolution has taken away a certain kind of job and provided for a new kind of job. And so that's what we're in the midst of, I think, kind of the fourth industrial revolution, if you will.
I'm curious what you like about Tesla. Do you think that the new technology is going to be able to bring down costs at Tesla? Because in terms of demand, it seems as though they have a little problem. At least they've had to goose it with prices. And, Elon Musk, all of a sudden sort of, in a way, kind of outing himself as a Trump Republican on Twitter can't be good for his Tesla customer base, right?
I like the CEO. He is so entertaining. No, but one of the names I also should have mentioned, sorry, Carol, was ServiceNow. That's one of our largest holdings. So I think a couple of things. He's either the smartest pricing meister around. I mean, he's forced Ford to have to cut prices twice this year, whereas his margins, though they've come down, are still 4 times that of Ford's. So I think he's using pricing as a hammer to get people into the ecosystem. Think of kind of like Apple, which is another one of our holdings. It's not really about the handset; it's about the ecosystem, and so I think that's what I just dated myself. I should have said the iPhone.
The handset. I like that.
It's okay. You're allowed. You're allowed.
It is a handset. That's not wrong. I didn't even flinch.
So I think he's using this as an opportunity. Yes, demand has slowed somewhat, but if you look at combustible engine vehicles, they were flat year over year, and EVs are still growing in the high double digits, teens.
Yeah, we're expecting EVs to be 18% of sales this year.
I think it's pretty wild. Yeah.
I mean, I don't want one, but I get why people do want them.
Why don't you want one?
Well, because I drive from Scottsdale to Incline Village, and it would take me about 4 weeks if I had to stop and charge up every 300 miles.
I'm with her.
Well, we're going to get there. Hey, Nancy, this was fun. Smart. Nancy Tengler. She's Chief Investment Officer at Laffer Tengler Investments on Zoom from Scottsdale, Arizona. Yeah, you don't own an EV, do you?
No, not. I have a hybrid. Well, my wife has a hybrid.
Is it just because of the plug-in problems and charging problems?
It's too hard to charge. It takes me forever to get places.
All right. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio, everybody.
company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We are minutes away from the latest batch of earnings reports, including Fox, Airbnb, and Wynn Resorts. Palantir Technologies, company we were just talking about, that is the data analysis firm co-founded by Peter Thiel, is seeing what's described as unprecedented demand for an artificial intelligence platform that's due to be released this month. The stock today up by 22%, but what about the broader outlook for AI? Mandeep Singh is a senior tech analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence.
My opinion is split in terms of where we are going to see businesses really make money with this generative AI wave. It's going to be more on the infrastructure side. I don't think you're going to see, immediate monetization on the application software side, which is where Palantir falls in. Yes, it's a good use case, but no one is going to pay for it right now, given the technologies in its infancy.
And again, Palantir shares, they're up now by just about 23%. Novavax shares are gaining the most in 2 years after the COVID-19 vaccine maker announced a restructuring plan that includes cutting about 25% of its global workforce. The company will also consolidate its facilities and infrastructure. Novavax shares, they are rallying now by just about 28.3%. And Microsoft's LinkedIn plans to shut its Jobs app in China, cutting about 716 jobs. Those are the company stories we're following this hour. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, along with Matt Miller, live in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio on YouTube, on Bloomberg Originals. We're going to head over to their TV team, talk about the trade, do some earnings in just a moment. But did you get your bonus this year?
I did. Not as high as I would have liked, and not as high as sort of the titans of finance get on Wall Street, right? But I saw a really interesting story on that note by Catherine Doherty on the Bloomberg Terminal this morning. Bonus season is projected to go in two directions. Obviously, regional bankers aren't going to get paid as much.
Kind of get that.
You get that. But big bankers, the Wall Street bankers, their bonuses are projected to jump 20%. I thought, so first of all, this is according to Johnson Associates, a compensation consultant that is held, I'm told, in very high regard. Sonali Basak says these guys are the real deal.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it's May.
Why are we talking about this now? Don't we usually talk about this?
Bonuses come in February.
So what's going on with that? Why is that now?
I just feel like a lot could happen between now and the end of the year, right? I mean, especially in these volatile times, especially ahead of a recession. We are still expecting a recession, right?
People say so, but I feel like there's a little bit of a debate about there. And then if we get a recession, is it kind of touch and go? Have we already gone through it? Like we've already gone through an earnings recession.
I just feel like you're right. But the thing is, there's no visibility. So how can Johnson Associates come out and say bank bonuses are going to be up 20% when they don't get paid out until the beginning of 2024? That's just, I found it surprising.
If we had something like something called a ChatGPT that we could maybe ask a
maybe
question
AI told them. Maybe Johnson Associates has their own AI.
I don't know. Maybe they're looking at, I don't know. You're right. We're not even halfway through. I'm not quite sure what they base it on, but maybe they're looking at trends. And it really depends on which part. If you're in M&A versus trading versus, that might determine whether or not.
For sure. M&A has slowed down substantially, but we're starting to see it pick up a little bit. For the smaller banks, if you get paid in your company's stock and your company is a regional bank, that hurts a lot.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Listen to this. Similarly, private equity firms, both big and small, incentive compensation likely to be flat. We saw that with some of the private equity firms coming out, right? We've talked about KKR, Apollo.
Yeah, I would take flat, though. Whatever they get, flat, I would take that.
What do you mean? Like no bonus or no change?
No change. I'll take whatever the private equities guys got last year.
All right, folks, time to head over to our TV team. Beyond the Bell, we're going to count you down. It starts right now.
500 full market coverage, right?
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlett Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell, it's a global simulcast with our friends Carol Massar and Matt Miller. Welcome to our audiences across Bloomberg Television, Radio Originals, and those folks streaming on YouTube. Basically down about 0.5% across the board here, Carol Massar, on all the major U.S. indices. But it's interesting because I think the market really is kind of in this holding pattern, looking at the economic data, and I guess, if you will, looking for White House and the Congress to finally sort of sort things out.
Yeah, I think the markets, we always talk about this list of things that, investors are worried about, and I think they would like to see, not go through kind of the tortured process that we've seen in the past when it comes to the debt ceiling. I still feel already a little bit tortured. So yeah, we'll see what happens out of that 4 o'clock meeting. I'm looking at volume compared with the past 10 days when it comes to those major equity indices, and it is down compared to about 21% here. So not a lot of participation, it feels like here.
I should just jump in and say I'm looking at some of the losers here. PayPal is one of them, and I think this is really interesting because PayPal saw a pickup in volume. So in the first quarter, the reporting quarter, it seemed like they did well. On the other hand, they think that their margins aren't going to expand as much as they previously had expected. So adjusted operating margins are going to grow 100 basis points. They had previously thought 125 basis points. And the interesting thing to me is not that the stock sold off, but that it got absolutely decimated, right? It's down by more than 1/10. So it just shows you how sensitive investors are to forecasts.
Yeah, I mean, that growth at any cost narrative, that's long gone here. It really is about margins, and it really is about profitability here. Of course, PayPal having its worst day going back to February of last year. As for the markets overall here, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to close in the red, down more than 50 points, or roughly about 0.2%. The S&P lower by about 19 points, or 0.5%, while the NASDAQ Composite is going to close down by about 0.6%, and the Russell 2000 lower by about 0.3%.
All right, quick check as we drill a little bit deeper into the S&P 500. You have most names in the index, Scarlett, lower today, 317 to be exact, 181 actually gaining some ground, 5 unchanged.
And that's really reflected in the industry performances as well. You only have a handful of gainers, 6 groups in the green right now, led by retail and capital goods and some consumer food and staple companies. But on the downside, you can see the losses there are much bigger than what we see in terms of gainers. Chip makers down about 1.7%. Also, the auto companies and parts companies off by 1.4%. These were among the big gainers yesterday. So a bit of a reversal from what we had on Monday, Carol.
All right, so to some of the individual gainers, we've been talking about it. Matt mentioned Palantir pretty much finishing almost at its best levels of the day, just a gain of about 23%. So it has been skyrocketing. It's up about 45% year to date. Posted a surprise profit in the first quarter, expects to stay in the black for the rest of 2023. It would be its first profitable year, all in about AI. So we did see Jefferies raising their price target on the company as well. Boeing up about 2.3% in today's session. A landmark order from one of its most important customers. We're talking about Ryanair. Matt, you actually talked about this on our show planning call. They're looking to buy as many as 300 of Boeing's largest 737 MAX. So it is a big deal. Why do we care? It just shows that carriers are willing to spend on fleet upgrades as air travel rebounds. So this is kind of a little bit of an economic indicator, you might say. And DaVita up about 13% in today's trade, top of the S&P. It's up about 35% year to date. It's a provider of health services, care services. Adjusted earnings per share guidance for the year, it boosted it, and that beat the average analyst estimate. So it had to do with earnings, but really a standout here today, Matt.
Yeah, so those were the gainers. In terms of the losers, I already mentioned PayPal, and it closed down 13%. It closed at the lowest level since October of 2017. So PayPal getting absolutely crushed in today's trade after the forecast disappointed. We also saw Dish Network down for a second day, and Dish has gotten crushed this year, down more than 50%. It's at multi-decade lows. They have a drop in subscribers that made them miss revenue, miss earnings, and as a result, it was down big yesterday. It's the second biggest loser on the S&P today after only PayPal. And then I saw also that a group of private equity companies, Blackstone, Blue Owl, and HPS, they're helping to buy Baxter.
We want to get to some earnings.
Oh, okay. I thought I
Sorry.
was supposed to go through three decliners. I thought.
All right, hold that thought. Hold that thought. We just want to do Airbnb, only because we have a stock moving here. I know, Matt, just hold on. All right, Airbnb, let's get to it. Here's one of the red headlines on it. We've seen companies buying back shares. Airbnb, count them among them, buying back up to $2.5 billion of their Class A common stock. Stock down, though, 4% in the aftermarket. In terms of the outlook, second quarter revenue, $2.35 billion to $2.45 billion. Estimate out there, $2.42 billion. So some estimate because of that lower end. As it looked at the first quarter, EPS 18 cents versus a loss of 3 cents year over year. So some improvement there. First quarter gross booking value, $20.4 billion. That was slightly above the estimate. First quarter revenue, and I should point out, first quarter adjusted EBITDA, both of them beating, but nonetheless some disappointment remain on that outlook. So you've got Airbnb down about 6% here. It's been on a tear, I should point out. It's up about 50% this year.
It has been on a tear. I'll be interested to hear some of the commentary from the call, because I mean, we talk about sort of, and then kind of Matt was alluding to this with PayPal, the companies that still are sort of showing that growth. So you talk about 20% year over year growth. I mean, in normal circumstances, anybody would take that, but the focus has really shifted, right? I mean, they've got to sort of come to the table with something more than that to justify some of these valuations.
Well, when we talk about, in terms of what's going on in the economy, we talk about people experiencing things, that they're traveling and so on and so forth. So you want somebody like an Airbnb that has bounced back so much in terms of the share price, growing their valuation. You want to really see some mega outperformance.
A company that's trading at 40 times current earnings.
I want some outperformance.
36, 37 times forward earnings.
A company whose CEO is going to be on my television show tomorrow. Brian Chesky joins us at 1:30 p.m. with Emily Chang. I think
but it is curious compared to, say, a Marriott or any of the other hotel companies that have seen a lot of demand from customers, that Airbnb's revenue forecast would come in a little bit light. Definitely a bit of a head scratcher there.
It makes you wonder, right? Okay, wait, what are they seeing that maybe, whether it's advanced bookings or so on and so forth, that maybe things are being reined in? And this remain to that bigger conversation we were talking, Matt and I were talking about recession, no recession, like what's going on? And so this is where that commentary on the call and trying to go through the release will be important.
All right, I also have some breaking news here from Electronic Arts, the video game publisher. Let's go with fiscal fourth quarter net bookings, because this is clearly of great importance to investors. $1.95 billion, beating the consensus estimate of $1.73 billion. So that is higher than anticipated. The stock is moving up right now, partly because of the outlook as well. Net bookings for the first quarter, which is the current quarter right now, $1.5 to $1.6 billion. Analysts were looking for $1.59 billion. And 2024 net bookings anywhere from $7.3 billion to $7.7 billion. Consensus estimate was just under $7.6 billion. And of course, there's a lot of excitement, Romaine and Matt, about the upcoming Star Wars Jedi Survivor release.
Ooh,
so much excitement.
Ooh, I can't wait. I can't wait for that. Some other earnings crossing the wire too. Twilio, those shares down about 14% right now in after hours trading, despite a beat on the top and the bottom line. Adjusted EPS did come in at 47 cents. That's more than 20 cents higher than what the street was looking for. Revenue was relatively in line with expectations. I'm not really seeing a forecast here, but the initial share reaction to the downside here, particularly for a company so steeped in that cloud space, a company that really has been so integral to what's been going on with the internet, to see this type of downdraft in here, it really raises the question here about what investors are really looking for, because it's certainly not the growth, because they're getting the growth, but there's something more they're looking for, and they're clearly not getting it, guys.
You care about GoPro?
Sure.
I just see GoPro coming out with a wider loss than estimated, 18 cents. We were looking for a 15-cent loss and more revenue than estimated. GoPro had revenue out, I think 174 million. Obviously, it's not a huge number. Revenue for the quarter, the estimate was for 165 million. So if I look at my GIP all, I can see GoPro shares dropping.
GoPro was trying to be a media company? That was its big...
Yeah, I do remember. They were going to try and do that pivot. It never really worked.
Yeah, still a hardware company.
All right, I'm going back to Airbnb. I'm not going back to GoPro. I'm going back to Airbnb. It's down about 8.5%, almost 9% here in the aftermarket. So some disappointment, as we said, on that forecast. I'm looking at the press release. They say more guests are traveling on Airbnb than ever before. They're traveling overseas, returning to cities. They're using Airbnb for longer stays. Supply growth continued to accelerate. So far it looks pretty optimistic, but again, not enough certainly to boost that outlook.
Yeah, and still looking for some additional earnings. Actually, I'm kind of interested to see what Affirm does.
Yeah.
They haven't crossed the wire just yet, but maybe get a little bit of a read here on what's been going on, of course, in the consumer spending space here.
I'm looking for Rivian.
You're looking for Rivian. I know that. I mean, how many cars are they going to sell, Matt?
Well, the target is for 50,000, so I want to see if they lift that. It's important to me because, actually, Carol was saying, do you own an electric vehicle? I do not.
Yeah.
If I were to buy one, it might be a Rivian. They're very expensive.
I mean, all the talk about Rivian, I could count the number of ones I've seen on the street on one hand.
Yeah, but I see a lot more Teslas on the street. You just parked on the street,
Yeah, there are
which
like
in
too
my
many of
neighborhood,
them.
right?
What's happening?
I don't know. They're like all over the place.
It's like a dystopian
They're
future
on
here.
sale right now.
They have a little variation in the style.
Some of them are on
Hey,
sale. Some of them are higher.
Let's all
higher
say it
price.
together. It starts with I and ends with an S. Indices.
Oh, no, that's rough.
No, I'm just kidding. Hey, listen, we just want to mention a headline crossing. President Biden begins meeting with congressional leaders on the debt limit. We were expecting it around this time. Hey, it's important. Investors
I'm waiting
are
for the
watching.
pictures that come out of
nothing
that
is going to
meeting.
come of it.
No, I'm waiting for the pictures. Then
Yeah.
everyone can sit there and read the tea leaves and dissect everyone's expression, see if anyone's like moving towards someone or not, you know.
I know, right?
That's what we're left with right now.
All right, that's what we're living on right now, guys. All right, that's a wrap for the Tuesday Trade, our cross-platform coverage, radio, TV, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again, same time, same place, tomorrow.
Come on now, let's compromise. You give a little, I'll give a little. Come on, let's get together. Let's get together, yeah, yeah, yeah. Why did you and I come by?
All right, folks, shifting gears from the market close and some earnings. We'll keep a watch on some of the trades in the aftermarket. But as we said, at this hour, we know President Biden is meeting with congressional leaders to talk about the debt limit. This was an invitation to the White House from the president. Let's get to it with Bloomberg News White House and politics team leader Mario Parker. He is in our Washington, D.C. bureau. So, Mario, good to have you here with Matt and myself. So, all right, set the stage. President's called everybody to the White House. So what should we expect, if anything, out of this meeting?
The way I view this is essentially for our boxing aficionado listeners out there is this is the weigh-in. This isn't the start to the match at all. This is when the two fighters gather in front of the press and kind of stare at each other and make faces and draw the lines in the sand. That's what we're expecting out of this. Both men, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and President Biden, have both signaled earlier today that they see they're just not going to budge on their positions as of right now, but also they're not even looking at having like a short-term solution at this point.
First of all, that's my favorite part of a
Which
boxing. Well, not my favorite part of a boxing match, but I do love it when they first meet up, size each other up, a little trash talk, you know. Sometimes they get into a little scuffle and they have their trainers pull them apart. That would be cool if McCarthy and Biden kind of got into a little scuffle a little bit and they had their, secretaries pull them apart. This is probably not going to happen. But we don't expect anything to come of this, right? I mean, there's no way Kevin McCarthy can be seen to kowtow to President Biden. And Biden has already said he doesn't want to entertain any of the wacky notions that Republicans bring to the table. So I just don't understand what's the point.
I mean, how much of this is just politics?
Well, all of it is politics for sure, Carol, and a great point as well, Matt. I mean, essentially, right now, Kevin McCarthy, everyone saw the 15 votes that it took for him to get the gavel in January, how long it took as well. So we know that he can, at least on first blush, fold his position or Republicans' position, particularly the far right part of his party, in the first meeting with the White House. That would essentially take the gavel away from him. Similarly, President Biden feels as though he has the moral high ground. The White House talking points up to this point has been that this has been done upwards of 70 sometimes. The last time that it was this tenuous back in 2011, there was a compromise reached as well. So he was vice president during that time. So this initial meeting, I mean, it is important. Don't get me wrong at all. It is important because it does at least set a marker and opens up the floor to some type of discussions. For the last several months, we hadn't even had that.
So, Mario, this is like one of those things I always get nervous that like our listeners or viewers are like, I'm out of here. Oh, debt ceiling, who cares? Like we've been here before, right? So,
or they've been hearing it all day long for 2 weeks already.
and then they matter when they don't get their Social Security check or some benefit, right? Or it's like that's what it really matters. So, what is likely to be on the table when a deal does get done? Because at some point they'll get something done.
Yeah, well, it's hard to forecast at this point what's going to be at the table. We do know, Carol, to your point, the minute that our listeners and average voters out there start hearing about things like delayed Social Security checks and those type of things, that's when those phones to the congressional offices get to ringing. Some of the low-hanging fruit that I would say that's out there that I've, in just speaking with sources, maybe clawing back some of that COVID funding that went out to the states. Maybe there's something to be done on welfare to work as well. Republicans who I've spoken to point to a ballot initiative in that Wisconsin Supreme Court race last month that while the Democratic justice ended up winning that race, there was a ballot initiative on conservative principles, particularly welfare to work, that played quite well. So maybe that may be some place at the White House and the House can find some room for compromise.
Apparently, Mario, and I just learned this, I don't remember hearing about it in school, but in the 14th Amendment, there's a clause that talks about the fact that the federal government has to pay its debt, and nobody can stop it from paying its debt. They put it in there because they had unruly Southerners back then after the Civil War, and they were worried that the Southerners would challenge, the Union debt. Now we have what looks like, at least from the Biden administration point of view, unruly Republicans that are challenging the U.S. government's ability to pay its debt. Why don't they just say, look, this is constitutional. We have to pay our debt. The debt ceiling is unconstitutional, and just, barrel through.
Well, you've seen President Biden kind of flick at that in some ways, where he says that this is part of the democracy that we have, that America has an obligation to continue to pay its debt, to be good stewards over that debt as well, to be good faith creditors, and essentially saying that this is, that this is an obligation. This is a constitutional obligation. What the White House has stopped short of saying, President Biden in interviews over the last week, as well as Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, they've all stopped short of saying that they would support or that the president would go for that 14th Amendment legal argument. That's something that hasn't been done before. It's very tenuous, and it will leave markets just as jittery as they are right now, if not more jittery, because it would definitely be challenged by Republicans in court.
Yeah, I have to think that if the president came out and said, yeah, we got it, this is real, don't you think that would create some nervousness in the markets? I mean, I don't know. It feels like a bigger issue, and I guess as someone who does vote, you do wonder when we're going to get our financial house in order, but I just feel like we just constantly pass it from administration to administration. So as Americans, as investors, what is the smart conversation that we need to be having here?
Well, I guess that's a great point that you raised, just civically even, whether or not this needs to be. There is some murmurs here in Washington, D.C. about whether or not this should continue to go on each and every year. We see these fights kind of bubble up, as I mentioned before. The last big one was in 2011 when Joe Biden was vice president. So there has been some whispers in Washington about whether or not there's some type of solution to ensure that the debt going forward, we won't have to have these type of conversations. But as we see right now, this is, whether we like it or not, it's a political cudgel that either side is able to kind of employ in order to extract some of the things that they want out of this town.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling a lot more to come on this. Mario Parker, thanks for checking in with us, White House and politics team leader at Bloomberg News there in our Washington, D.C. bureau. While we were talking, Rivian out with their earnings. You want to talk about it, Matt?
Yeah, Rivian, we saw Lucid come out yesterday and disappoint the market, and now Rivian has come out as well with, I guess, earnings that beat, frankly. The adjusted loss per share was $1.25, and we were looking for $1.56. So we say a narrower loss than had been anticipated. They also had revenue that was slightly higher. The street was looking for $660.3 million, and Rivian came out with revenue of $661 million.
Stock's up 3% in the aftermarket.
Yeah, so I guess the street likes that. I'm still coming through the release, looking for any change to their production target, because we did see that with Lucid. They said they're not going to produce as many vehicles as they had thought they were going to.
There is a headline that says that it firms its EV output plan.
So 50,000 vehicles. Yeah, there
Is
you
that
go.
it?
So yeah, still sees full year production of 50,000 vehicles. The estimate was for them to raise that a little at 51,462, but they could still make that throughout the year, obviously.
Yeah, stock down 24%, 25% so
I like
far
the
in 2023.
SUV version. Have you seen the SUV version of
I
the
have
Rivian?
not.
Very cool.
TBD. I'll have to check it out. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. Lots of earnings after the bell. We begin with Airbnb. The shares are trading lower after hours, down now by 9.77%. Airbnb delivered a muted forecast for revenue in the second quarter, suggesting rising prices and a murky economic outlook are beginning to weigh on consumer appetite for trips. Rivian Automotive shares, they are higher after hours. Rivian right now is up by 2.8%. Rivian reported a narrower than expected loss to start the year and reaffirmed its annual production plans as efforts to cut costs boost the electric vehicle maker. Again, after hours right now, Rivian now up by 3.4%. Wynn Resorts reported adjusted EPS for the first quarter that did beat the average analyst estimate. And after hours, we do have shares of Wynn. They're up now by 2.3%. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all slumped ahead of a critical inflation report, while the debt ceiling impasse weighed on investor sentiment. S&P down 19 points today, a decline of 0.5%. Dow Industrials down 56, drop there of 0.2%. NASDAQ down 77, a decline of 0.6%. 10-year yield 3.52% with the 2-year 4.03%. Spot gold up 0.7% to 2,034. Bitcoin today up 0.3 to 27,643. And West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 73.49 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Masser, along with Matt Miller, live in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio on YouTube and Bloomberg Originals. You want to talk Rivian a little bit?
Yes. Well, we have Ed on the line, right?
We do.
Sometimes, I'll tell you what, I love talking to Ed about cars so much that occasionally after work, I'll just call him up.
I'm so sorry, Ed. Joining us right now in our weekly Plugged-In segment is Bloomberg News co-host of Bloomberg Technology, Ed Ludlow, in our San Francisco bureau. I say that with love. All right, Rivian. We see the share price moving in the aftermarket.
We should
now
also
up about
say
5%. What?
Ed knows more about Rivian than I think anybody at Bloomberg, because he's been to the factory. He's interviewed the CEO. He is truly an expert on the company. So that's why I always tap him for knowledge. What do you think about the release?
Gosh, you've set the bar high for me.
No pressure.
I mean, you know, based on earnings season so far in EV makers, the lack of surprises, the lack of negative is clearly the takeaway from investors. You know, sales on estimates, losses are really narrowing. The belt tightening that's gone at Rivian, simplifying everything, going back to basics is working. I would note, Matt, that production drops sequentially quarter on quarter, but that was only in the van that Rivian builds for Amazon. The consumer car, they ramp production, and now they're just being disciplined, and you see that reflected in the narrowing loss.
I don't see that broken out on the older data. I know they're doing that now, but if I type in BI space AUTMN, I always look to see, because I want Rivian to make more of these cars so that the wait list isn't so long and so that the price isn't so high, so I can eventually at least dream about getting one. Right now, I'd have to wait at least a year, wouldn't I?
Yeah, I heard you guys talking about the other big piece of news, I suppose, which was reaffirming guidance for the year, 50,000 units. I think that's pretty conservative. You guys remember that I reported a few weeks ago that 4 days after earnings, executives at Rivian guided staff internally at an all hands that actually they're on track to build more like 62,000 units this year, 12,000 more than they guided investors. I'm sure that didn't go down well with Rivian's IR department, but that's what we're told by sources.
You know, I'm looking at some BI research. It says Lucid and Rivian lose more than $200,000 on every EV they sell.
Are these two lumped together? I feel like I didn't know Lucid was really as much of a player. I mean, they only sold like 1,400 cars in the last quarter, right?
Yes.
So
yeah, and in the last quarter, Rivian built almost 10,000. You know, Lucid is saying it may deliver 10,000 in the year. So, you know, I think the narrative around Lucid is that it may never break out of being a niche, high-end luxury player. Rivian is ramping and seeking volume production, and the other kind of forecast from them is they're targeting gross profitability into 2024, and a big part of the thesis they outline is that will come with greater volumes.
So how are we supposed to look at these companies? Do we look at them as growth companies because we are pivoting in terms of the marketplace? Like, how do we look at them?
I think they trade at a multiple that's so high we don't even list it on the Bloomberg.
Well, they don't make money, so that's
yeah.
But I mean, should we?
You have to have an E to have a PE ratio.
Should we assume that all of these guys are going to ultimately make it in the end, or not necessarily?
A little bit of sort of insider Bloomberg thinking. Every time we write a story, I always ask myself, what's the context the reader needs to know here? Usually paragraph 3 or 4. Remember that Rivian's IPO in November 2021 was the 6th biggest in US history. It had the creme de la creme of institutional backers and strategics like Amazon and Ford. That was the reason that we set it apart from the big pool of other EV startups that are chasing Tesla. It has actually maintained that lead on the basis it's building at much higher volumes than all these other upstarts.
How hampered has Rivian been by the supply chain snarls? I mean, is that really the story here? Is that what's holding them back? Or has demand died down for these vehicles?
So it continues to be a problem. It is listed as an ongoing headwind in the earnings letter. You know, RJ Scaringe, the CEO, in 2021 and into 2022, he was phoning up the CEOs of his suppliers and saying, come to the factory, tour it with me. I can demonstrate to you that if you send me more parts, particularly semiconductors, I can build more cars. This is not an issue of like what the end demand is from Rivian's perspective. They just had to demonstrate like, give us the parts, guys, we'll build them. They still have a backlog, although they've stopped breaking out their reservations. I think the story of Rivian is very much it's supply constrained. Its orders or reservations are still quite a lot greater than the number it can build each quarter. So it's going to be hard to see when that demand curtails off.
So go to the balance sheet. So it looks like cash and equivalents were $11.2 billion at the end of the first quarter, so down from $11.6 billion in the previous 3 months here. We talked about what they're losing per vehicle. I mean, so what's the runway that this company has?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. In the quarter gone, they tapped the green bond market, which was quite an interesting move. They also did it with convertibles, which can have a dilutory effect on the shares. So the stock reaction was negative. But they have a lot of money. CapEx is really interesting. It was about $280 million in the quarter. The street thought it would be $500 million. It's more evidence that the belt tightening's working. There are really long-term questions about how that $11.2 billion of cash and cash equivalents lasts, how long it lasts, and what they might have to do to raise more capital. But Rivian has always said it's sufficient to take them through to start of production of their next generation vehicle at a plant in Georgia that hasn't been built yet. So to their mind, they have a long runway with it.
What's shocking to me about the industry, I look across Rivian, Lucid, Fisker, Canoo, you know, and I feel like Rivian is the one that has the best chance of these startup EV companies actually surviving. And then I see that Lucid has a bigger market cap.
So that's odd, right?
It's weird. Yeah. I don't get it. But I mean, when you look at these companies, don't you think, Ed, that Rivian looks like, at least in terms of getting the vehicles out, people buying them, people liking them, production quality, it looks like they could be a car maker still in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, there are so many threads you could pull on here. I mean, the cynic and the sell-side analyst who's bearish on the stock would say the balance sheet cash is equivalent to their market cap. That's not a position you ever want to be in, where your valuation is, you know. But the other sort of cynical view is that they've ramped probably more smoothly and in greater volumes than Tesla did in its first year of Model 3 production. But Tesla didn't burn through anywhere near as much cash as this. And that's where the patience of investors has worn thin. Like, you can't infinitely spend $1 billion a quarter to reach scale. And so that's now Rivian reacting with the cost discipline, and it's showing on the bottom line or narrow losses.
Got a question you would want to ask on the call?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to get the opportunity to ask him a question this quarter, but I would just say, Matt's demand question, how can they demonstrate real evidence that the demand is there for their vehicles at this price point and into the future? But also, when they're going to announce a deal with someone other than Amazon for the commercial vehicle business, because that was a big part of the valuation too.
Yeah, and I mean, a ton of commercial vehicles, but then what was like 100,000 that the Amazon ordered? But you'd expect other companies to come in and order them too. If it was a good idea for Amazon to buy those, it had to be a good idea for others. You know, the demand question is one I'd also wonder about Tesla, especially for the lower end vehicles. Do you think the demand is still there? Because people questioned it when they lowered prices.
Well, Tesla has the lever of price cuts and rises that Rivian and others don't. And we got real clear evidence when Tesla cut prices, it unlocked pockets of specific demand at that price point. Electric vehicles are still expensive for the everyday American and everyday citizen around the world.
And Rivian has not cut prices.
And me.
Too expensive.
I would say a lot
we'll
of
buy you
folks.
one. We should pitch in, Carol, and buy Ed an electric vehicle.
Go ahead, knock yourself out, baby.
I said we.
I want to get my own. No, but it's kind of crazy that
nuts.
the three of us are talking about
How expensive?
How
these things-
expensive
Well, even ICE,
cars.
even all cars are expensive, very expensive.
Yeah.
But we still need to send one to Ed.
All right, Ed Ludlow, we'll get right on it. Matt and I are putting in an order for you, and maybe you'll get it in like a year, right? Because
Yeah,
they're back.
it takes a while.
Yeah, it
Semiconductor shortage.
Ed Ludlow, he's a busy man, but finding time for us. Co-host of Bloomberg Technology at Bloomberg News, joining us from our San Francisco bureau. Catch him and Caroline Hyde on Bloomberg TV from noon to 1 Wall Street time. Rivian shares, Matt, they're up about 6%.
Yeah, but at like $13, down from $120 at their high.
All right, perspective. All right, let's get a perspective on world and national news. Off to D.C. we go, and Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. A New York jury is ordering Donald Trump to pay writer E. Jean Carroll $5 million in damages after being found liable for sexual assault and defamation.
Jurors returned the verdict after deliberating for less than 3 hours. Carroll had accused Trump of raping her in the dressing room of a Fifth Avenue department store in the 1990s. He was found liable for sexual abuse rather than rape. And because it was a civil rather than a criminal case, Trump was never at risk of imprisonment over Carroll's allegations. The standard of proof was also lower. The jury only needed to find that Trump was more likely liable than not, as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. Trump declined to testify in person and never appeared in the courtroom. Jill Schneider, Bloomberg Radio.
Former President Trump has reacted to the verdict, posting on Truth Social that, quote, "This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time." Well, they haven't spoken since February. This afternoon, President Biden is meeting right now at the White House with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and other congressional leaders to discuss a way forward on the debt ceiling. Greg Valliere, chief U.S. policy strategist at AGF Investments, is keeping his expectations low.
I think they could come out and say we're going to redouble our efforts, we're going to work harder, we're adamantly opposed to default. They might have some soothing rhetoric, but the idea of a deal, I got to tell you, I think that's weeks or months away before we actually do get a deal.
Greg Valliere tells Bloomberg the debt standoff might not be fully resolved until the fall. After spending months recovering from a case of shingles, Senator Dianne Feinstein is expected to arrive back in Washington later today in time to cast a vote on judicial nominees. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Connection lost.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long at Bloomberg. We begin with a developing story and a headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service. Jane Street and Jump are pulling back on crypto trading amid a U.S. crackdown. A down Tuesday, S&P fell 19 points today, down by about 0.5%. Equities slumped ahead of a critical inflation report tomorrow. Debt ceiling impasse dragged on investment sentiment. Dollar edged higher. The Dow down 57 points, a drop of 0.7%. Nasdaq down 77, a decline of 0.6%. 10-year yield 3.52% with the 2-year 4.02%. Spot gold up $14 the ounce to $2,035, up 0.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.5%, 73.55 a barrel. Well, as for the overall market backdrop, Nancy Tengler is Chief Investment Officer at Laffer Tengler Investments, and she was our guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I do think we're starting to kind of come out of the fog. The Fed is, if not done, almost done. We have seen better earnings than were advertised. The economy still seems pretty decent. The consumer's in good shape. I think you're starting to see a crack in the job market, which in the labor market, so I think that will help things as well.
Airbnb delivered a muted forecast for revenue in the second quarter, suggesting that rising prices and a murky economic outlook are beginning to weigh on consumer appetite for trips. After hours, we do have Airbnb shares down by about 10%. We're also keeping an eye on Rivian Automotive. The shares are up now by 5%. It also reported a narrower than expected loss to start the year. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow is following the Rivian story.
The lack of surprises, the lack of negative is clearly the takeaway from investors. You know, sales on estimates, losses are really narrowing. The belt tightening that's gone at Rivian, simplifying everything, going back to basics is working.
And again, after hours, Rivian trading higher now by 5%. Recapping stocks lower, S&P down 19, drop there of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Massar along with Matt Miller here on Bloomberg Business Week. Looking at the global fresh fruits and veggies market, over $144 billion last year, forecast to grow to some $211 billion by 2028. So we're talking about a lot of stuff.
It's also something, I haven't really thought about it before, but this is something that I buy almost every day.
And?
You know, at least every other day, I find myself at the supermarket down the street buying fresh fruit and vegetables because you know, that's the stuff that you can't buy it and keep it for a week or two,
right.
like I do with like salami, for example, you know, or bread. So this is something you have to keep going and getting all the time. Well, and I never really thought about that.
Well, we take it for granted. It's just going to be there. Our next guest, though, doesn't take it for granted. He's got a company that is working with buyers and sellers in the fruit and veggie market, the fresh fruit and veggie market. So let's get to it with Patrick McCullough, CEO of the digital marketplace for the global produce industry. We're calling and talking about Produce Pay. He's here in our studio. Good to have you here with Matt and myself. Tell us about your company and what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Carol. Yeah, we're trying to solve a big waste problem. So this is a $1.3 trillion industry. It's analog still. It's push supply. And we're attacking 60% economic waste. Most people don't know this, but 40% of the harvested fruit and vegetables perishes before it's consumed.
How much?
40%.
I can imagine. If I buy a box of grapes, more often than not, they go bad before I finish them, you know? And that's just at my home. So if you talk about from the farm into the truck, shipped to the store, and then to me, it's got to be, I mean, obviously it's very big.
It is. And if you think about what can be done about this, we offer access to market, access to financial products, trade protection. So we're trying to help, starting with the farm, the ability to pull through for the U.S. consumer faster, fresher, riper, healthier produce.
So where do you start? I mean, it's such a
how do you do this?
huge fragmented market, and you know, do you go to every farm out there? That seems like a very difficult communication.
That makes us unique. We started with the farm. A lot of people attack the middle, the wholesale distribution, or some people think, oh, the answer's in retail grocery, and there's certainly problems to to be solved there. We believe the farm makes key decisions in how they produce, how they grow. There's human rights, there's water rights, and there's carbon footprint consequences.
Right.
But they also make decisions whether to let, let's say, a grape hang and become a tier 1 grade A premium grape, or if they don't crop thin and they take weight to market and they do that through the open market, then you got speculators, brokers that might be playing for arbitrage, who might hold on to those grapes, try to corner the market, wait for prices to come up at the expense of the U.S. consumer.
So how do you get to this? How do you fix it? Because it sounds to me like to some extent we need to maybe, I don't know, do we need to reduce supply so there's not so much out there that ultimately ends up as waste? Like, how do we fix this?
So, you know, there's always an argument about, you know, world hunger, and is it a distribution problem? And I can tell you, looking at the path to the U.S. consumer, one of the healthiest things we put in our mouths has one of the dirtiest paths there. So if you think about 4 to 8 middle people actually touching produce that don't always add value, there are some that add great value. If you're bringing capital to a farm or to a distributor, if the distributor is pack and shipping with quality control, brand recognition, but we're trying to lean out the beginning and the end. We're trying to take out the arbitrage specialists in the middle, these brokers that don't add real value, for the benefit of speed to the consumer. If you can shorten that journey.
How do you do that?
You do that by redesigning the whole vertical.
So in other words, it goes from Farmer Joe or Jane straight to...
The idea is bring retail grocers and farmers together through our marketplace, through our financial and trade assurance products. A lot of what's happened in this industry is because it's been rampant with speculators and a lot of volatility with the changes in our world, think weather. There's a lot of inefficiencies built in, and a lack of trust. We're trying to bridge the beginning and the end for the benefit of efficiency and attacking that 60% economic waste.
So, first of all, do you always wash fruit before you eat it?
Yeah, well, most of the time.
Do you?
I try
my
to.
wife tells me to do it, but I feel like
most of the time
I have a stronger immune system because I don't.
I cater to that belief myself. I don't wash my fruit either.
So a lot of this is about financing, right? Because I look on your website, it says $3 billion plus in fresh produce financed. What does that mean?
And finding counterparties, correct?
That's right. So the biggest problem farms have is they have tremendous input costs, labor, seed, fertilizer, and they're waiting for a harvest 5 or 6 months later. We bridge that working capital gap. That's our primary product today. But by doing that super well and doing that with the best farms in the world, we're able to then take them to the right distributor marketer partners who will introduce us to the right retailers. And then we can take the speculative spot market out by creating programmatic negotiations where we tell the farm, grapes.
So you are kind of, to some extent, become a financial middleman,
We are.
but you take out the physical middleman.
That's right.
Is that
That's right.
kind of what you're doing?
We're redesigning how the industry works. We're asking retail come earlier with fixed pricing so that farmers can plant and take risks and breed the right programs that might perish
It's
slower.
like buying an EV. You got to put the money up front, right?
So
You gotta
talk to
wait
us about
kind
the
of thing.
market. I mean, I'm interested to know about price fluctuations, shortages. Do you see, are strawberries going to shoot through the roof in terms of the price? Are we going to be able to get grapes cheaper? What do you see out there?
Fires in Chile recently, floods in California impacted the strawberry market. So grapes and strawberries, yeah, supply and demand is upset right now. So in the near term, we're going to have premiums on those products.
Do nuts count as produce? Do you do nuts?
We don't do nuts today, but it's in our future.
But Patrick, aren't we always going to have, disruptions in terms of prices because climate change, it's real?
That's right. It is climate change, and it's the global nature of what the U.S. consumer is asking for. We're asking for 12 months a year organic blueberries. Well, we don't grow organic blueberries in North America 12 months a year. So we have to go to South America or South Africa to fill in those voids.
Or do we stop that?
Well, that's the question.
Well, do you stop that? I mean,
don't
if you
know.
want fresh blueberries, you probably go buy fresh blueberries whenever you want.
I think I'll be okay.
The dilemma is the out-of-season blueberries hold a premium because they're scarcer.
Yeah.
So there's more money to be made there. So I think this is a trend that continues.
Yeah. Also, you got to ship them from wherever they come. Dirty diesel.
Cold stored.
And
too.
cold storage.
So terrible for the environment.
Local produce.
Yeah, think about, I love the example of a tomato at your farmer's market in the summer, right?
Just quickly.
Ripe and red. The thing in the grocery store, orange and hard. Different
I agree.
animal.
It's like different. It's just not the same. Come back.
Love
This
to.
is interesting.
Thank you so
It's
much.
certainly We talk about the food space. There needs to be some disruption, innovation. Patrick McCullough, CEO at Produce Pay, joining us here in studio. Carol Master, Matt Miller. Matt loves his blueberries.
All the time.
All the time. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Lots of earnings after the close of trading. Airbnb, that stock is moving lower. Right now, we've got Airbnb down by almost 11%. It did deliver a muted forecast for revenue in the second quarter. Rivian Automotive shares after ours, they are advancing. Rivian reported a narrower than expected loss to start the year. It also reaffirmed its annual production plans as efforts to cut costs boosted the electric vehicle maker. Wynn Resorts out with adjusted EPS for the first quarter that beat the average analyst estimate. After ours, Wynn shares, they are now trading unchanged. Boeing secured a landmark order from one of its most important customers, with Ryanair Holdings agreeing to buy as many as 300 of the company's largest 737 MAX aircraft. And with more on that story, here's Bloomberg's Kimberly Adams.
Charlie, it's a bet on the post-pandemic travel recovery. Boeing and Ryanair say the order has has a value of $40 billion, though customers typically secure big discounts on major deals. The huge purchase of Boeing's largest 737 variant marks an important endorsement from one of the U.S. manufacturer's most loyal customers and highlights how carriers are willing to splurge on fleet upgrades again as air travel rebounds. Ryanair is Boeing's biggest buyer in Europe, having built its entire fleet of short-haul aircraft around the workhorse model. Charlie?
And that's Kimberly Adams reporting. Jane Street Group and Jump Crypto, two of the world's top market-making firms, are pulling back from trading digital assets in the U.S. as regulators crack down on the industry. Those are our top company stories, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Matt Miller here in for Tim Stenevec with Carol Masser in the Interactive Broker Studio. Let's get a quick check on the latest world and national news. For that, we go to Nancy Lyons at the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Nancy?
Thanks, Matt. President Biden and congressional leaders are behind closed doors holding their first face-to-face meeting in months in hopes of averting a default on the nation's debt. With the government at risk of being unable to meet its obligations as soon as June 1st, today's meeting is fraught with drama. Republicans want sweeping cuts to federal spending in exchange for avoiding default, while President Biden says he wants a clean bill with no strings attached. Well, a New York jury took less than 3 hours to find Donald Trump liable for sexually assaulting and defaming writer E. Jean Carroll. Jurors also ordered the former president to pay her $5 million in damages. Bloomberg Law host June Grasso says Trump's team did not put up much of a defense in this civil trial.
Of course, all the evidence that was presented was on one side. Donald Trump did not even make an appearance. So they probably looked at it and said, well, he didn't show up, and they saw what he said in the deposition, which didn't really help his case. And she had not only her testimony, where she was on the stand for several days, but also she had supporting witnesses.
Bloomberg's June Grasso says what was surprising was the speed in which the jurors reached their verdict. Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, just spoke outside of the courthouse.
Strange verdict. This was a rape claim. It was a rape case all along, and the jury rejected that, but made other findings. So we'll obviously be appealing those other findings, but they rejected her rape claim, and she'd always claimed this was a rape case. So it's a little perplexing.
Tacopina says he believes some of the evidence, like the Access Hollywood tape of Trump, should not have been allowed. Ukrainian officials will soon have some additional help in dealing with Russia's recent wave of drone and missile attacks.
You can see by the end of the day, it's time to place order. I think I will place order for euro against United States dollar. As you can see, we have 3 short positions. One position was opened at 109.03, another one 109.63, and another one was opened at 110.43. If I will, right now I am in profit. I'm in profit about 1,000 pounds. 1 pip equals 100 pounds. So I've got 10 pips profit. If you don't know how I calculated this, you need to get into the seminar. You need to contact me, and I will explain to you how I trade. Anyway, these 3, if you will calculate all these 3 contracts, I have the average price will be, if I will close at 109.69, it will be 0. I will not make any profit. So right now I'm in profit, and I want to place order to sell at 109.59. So if this price overnight will reach this level, the price, the contract will be closed, and I will collect profit. Okay, guys. So this is the price right now. Right now, as you can see, it's 109.60. So if it will move higher, I will still keep this contract. I kept them for a while, and if you are traders, you're supposed to know that if it's short position, I don't have to pay overnight anything at all. Broker pays me for overnight charges. Okay, guys. So order placed to sell all 3 positions at 109.59. Okay, guys. Have a nice evening, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. We will see if I manage to close this position at 109.59. Stay safe, guys.
threw documents at his car, but he just let him slide right off and drove into the gates of his probably amazing mansion and didn't pick him up off the ground. So you've not been served.
The gates close, right? He's like, I don't have it. I don't have it. All right. Anyway, it's kind of a wacky Tuesday based on some of these headlines that are crossing, but we got more to come. Matt and myself right here on Bloomberg Business Week. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everybody. Bloomberg Business Week continuing on this Tuesday. You know Tim is on leave. I'm Carol Masser along with Matt Miller in for Tim, live in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio on YouTube and Bloomberg Originals. Hey, coming up, we're going to talk about managing this situation. We've seen, I know we've been talking about the Biden administration, specifically the president when it comes to the debt ceiling, but behind the scenes, over the last few weeks, we've seen members of the administration really trying to appease, calm down U.S. allies when it comes to the relationship between U.S. and China. What decoupling?
Or stir it up a little bit, you know? Because I think they want a nuanced spot in the middle